Chapter 471. Jimmy's News. Michael immediately transferred himself back to Metropolis using the shadow he left on Jimmy. As he opened his eyes, he saw that he was standing in the middle of the street looking up at a large building made out of stone bricks. And at the very top of the building was the name, Daily Metro. He looked around and saw people coming in and out of the building holding newspapers in their hands. Many of them were small kids the same age as him, probably working as newspaper boys that shouted extra, extra, in their usual route. He even saw a glimpse of the front page title, which said, Boy with Quad Elemental Mastery. Michael, you're here. Jimmy approached Michael and led him out of the sidewalk and near the walls of the Daily Metro. What is it? I finally found something about that thing you wanted to know. That thing. Yeah, the auction. Michael remembered that he asked Jimmy to keep his ears out for any talk about the auction in Metropolis. Back in Batroc Town, when he first met the Legacies, he distinctly remembered them talking about an auction that was about to occur in Metropolis. He wanted to participate in this auction because it had the potential to have one important item that he desperately needed, the Spirit of Old. According to Alaric and the others, the auction this time around is rumored to have Sue as one of their premier items to be sold off. Back then, he wasn't that interested in participating in this auction. Now, he considered it as a necessity. He needed that Sue. Even if it was just one drop, he would spend an enormous amount of money to buy it. Did you really? When and where's the auction taking place? He asked with a lot of enthusiasm. Jimmy was even taken aback, never realizing that this auction meant so much to Michael. There's this large auction house in the middle of Metropolis. They're called Barnaby's Vault. The items that they sell are so valuable that they only do an auction once a year. And still, they are able to become the biggest auction house in Metropolis. Almost everyone in Metropolis wants to participate in the auction. The Legacies, for sure, will have a spot. It's probable that the Duchess and her family would also attend the auction. The people Jimmy mentioned were considered high-ranking in the Metropolis social ladder. He had no doubt that they, especially the Legacies, had extremely deep pockets that rivaled or even exceeded his own. Of course, he wouldn't back down from a show of wealth. That was the one thing he had a lot of. Do you know what kind of items they're auctioning off? I'm not sure. The list of items is kept a secret by the auction house until the night itself. However, there have been some rumors that it will include an extremely priceless liquid that the Legacies are keeping their eyes on. That's gotta be Sue, Michael thought. His excitement for the auction was growing by the second. How can I participate in that auction? He asked, visibly excited. Seeing his expression, Jimmy couldn't help but purse his lips. He looked hesitant to ruin Michael's mood. Unfortunately, Michael, the auction is only reserved for those that have a high enough ranking in the Golden 500. They want to make sure that the people participating in their auction have enough money to bid on their items. The Golden 500 is their way of ensuring that. That definitely put a hamper in Michael's excitement. The Reborn company was in the 450th spot in the rankings, which wasn't bad by any means. However, he wasn't sure if it qualified for such a classy event. What's the minimum ranking needed? Jimmy sighed. It's reserved for those ranking 400 and below. Oh, that's not bad, Michael muttered. Their 450th rank was given to them a long time ago. They have improved and expanded their business multiple times since then. By all means, Reborn should be much higher on the rankings by now. I told you before that Angora City doesn't have the right authorization to increase your ranking, right? That's the reason why I even went to Metropolis in the first place. The Daily Metro is authorized to increase a company's ranking up to the 200th rank. So, I thought that if I presented them with all the articles I wrote about Reborn, they would recognize your company's success and increase your rank by at least 50 spots. Michael didn't like the look on Jimmy's face. Yeah. Well, I failed. As it turns out, they don't accept my evidence as something true. They think I'm lying, those skeptics. Anyway, they won't increase your ranking in the Golden 500 unless you prove those claims here in Metropolis. They want hard evidence. They want you to show that you're worthy of a better rank by accomplishing that in the Metropolis market. Michael used to not care much about the rankings since it never affected his business. For all he knew, it was just a nice title that people recognized. But now it was what separated him from his beloved Sue. It was unfortunate that he had to prove that he deserved a higher rank. Unfortunately, he had only officially sold 7,000 sales in the Metropolis market. Those people that gathered at the festival didn't count because it didn't amount to any sales. Still, he didn't get discouraged. He was going to prove Reborn in Metropolis anyways, with or without the need for a better rank. Once he established his business in Main Street, his rank would naturally increase. "I'm sorry. I failed as a journalist," Jimmy cried out. Michael had to console him. "It's fine. By the time we finish construction on Main Street, we'll get that rank in no time." Jimmy slapped his own chest, showing a look of determination on his face. "I shall make sure to document each and every achievement that Reborn can do. I promise you that." "Good. I'll look forward to it," Michael said. And just as he was about to leave, Jimmy suddenly remembered something. "Wait, Michael. When I was in the Daily Metro headquarters, I was able to have a glimpse of one piece of news they'd been working on. They are doing a piece on a particular family in Metropolis. The article talked about their downfall and their failure to keep up with the other legacies in Metropolis. Despite their name, they were unable to live up to expectations." "Who are they?" Jimmy looked at Michael, confused. "You don't know them?" He looked back at Jimmy and mirrored his confusion. "Why would I know them?" Jimmy gestured for Michael to come closer, before looking around warily, as if not wanting others to hear their conversation. "It's because they're Vanderbilts," Jimmy revealed. Michael's eyes widened. Vanderbilt. This was the first time he had ever heard that name aside from his parents. He should have known. Metropolis was the gathering of inheritors from all major conglomerates in the world. Of course, there was going to be someone from the most successful conglomerate in the world. He had just separated from that name for so long that he almost forgot about it. But as he thought about it now, he realized it was common sense. The legacies used to be Alaric, Aerith, Bobby, Florexis, and the unknown Vanderbilt, mirroring the 5 biggest conglomerates in the world. Chapter 472. Construction in Main Street. A Vanderbilt was kicked out from the legacies? Michael muttered in confusion. Florexis was kicked out because he broke the rules. Could the unknown Vanderbilt have done the same? The legacies used to be 5, but now there's just 3 of them. As for why this Vanderbilt got kicked out, it's probably because they were unable to compete with the market of Metropolis. I did some digging earlier, and I found out that the Vanderbilt business here has been slowly losing their territories to other companies. They used to rival Alaric and the other legacies a few years ago, but now they just own a fraction of what they used to have. From what I heard, they had to let go of their territories in order to pay off their debt. What happened was that they tried to expand their business and took a lot of risk in the process. But the venture ended up in failure, leading to them being buried in a lot of debt. Even though Michael didn't know who they were, he still felt a little bad because they were still his relatives no matter what. "And their business here hasn't gone well?" he asked. "Yeah. They were unable to keep up with the other legacies, who kept their success throughout the years. They're just a shadow of who they once were. I just thought you'd like to know." Michael thanked Jimmy for the information. Now, he wasn't planning on going over to this Vanderbilt and giving them lots of money to fix their business. He didn't even know them. However, he did have some thoughts about talking with them as relatives. He wanted to know how they were related and if they knew his parents. It would also help him to know how and why they lost their footing. If he knew the truth directly from them, then he could possibly use that information to prevent himself from following their footsteps. "Would you like me to investigate them further? Maybe ask them if they want to talk?" Jimmy asked Michael. "That would be great." Michael immediately went over to Main Street to look over his territories. He didn't want to waste any more time. So, he asked for Kong and other Rebornian construction workers to start tearing down the warehouses left behind by Flare Corp. A few minutes later, Kong and the engineers arrived via shadow teleportation skill courtesy of himself. Of course, they brought with them the tools and materials needed for construction. They even had sacks and sacks of concrete with them, ready to be used just by adding a bit of water. Boss, here's the blueprint for our headquarters. Miss Castell already gave me the specifications needed for the structure, Kong said confidently. The chief engineer used his skill to project a 3D version of the blueprint into the air, allowing Michael to see what they looked like once construction was finished. On the right side of the street was where their headquarters would be located. Kong chose a simple design for this headquarters, taking the signature architecture of the nation of Reborn and allowing the building to give off a warm but powerful feeling. Now, from an outsider's perspective, their headquarters looked small. After all, it only had one floor in total. But in truth, there were actually multiple floors spanning downwards. Kong chose to create layered basements for security purposes since this would be their headquarters for the foreseeable future. Aside from security, expanding underground also gave them the opportunity to build beyond the boundary of their small territory in Main Street. Their headquarters was like an ant's nest. At the top, people could only see a small hill. But underground, it spread far and contained multiple rooms enough for an entire army of people. Now, such an ambitious project wouldn't be possible using normal standards. After all, creating levels further and further underground created lots of problems like heating and ventilation. Not only that, but the structure could collapse entirely. But Michael didn't have a problem with that. He intended to power the whole thing with generators that pumped air in and out, allowing for a cool breeze that circulated throughout the rooms. As for the risk of collapse, he didn't worry about it one bit. Kong was a competent engineer that was trained by ChatJK4 itself. Good job on the headquarters, Kong. It may be your best work yet, he praised. The yellow Hobmonkey inwardly cheered. I am honored. Now, tell me about our new department store here. Michael looked over to the opposite side of the street. This was where their whole operation would take place. And unlike their headquarters, Kong designed the structure to be like traditional buildings with multiple floors spanning upwards. Right now, there's just 4 floors in total, Kong mentioned. But I made sure to add some possibilities to an expansion. If we need more, I can put another floor on top of the existing one. That's smart, Michael realized. They don't know if they would get another territory in Metropolis. So Kong designed their store with the future in mind. Even if this was the only place they were allotted, it could still accommodate a lot of customers as the company grew in popularity. Shall we start the project, boss? Once he gave the signal, the Rebornian workers started knocking down the warehouse little by little. The unique skill he gave them allowed for easy dismantling without creating a lot of mess. In just under an hour, they were able to completely turn the empty warehouse into an empty plot of land. Right after that, they began digging out a large hole in the ground for the underground levels. This laborious task would have taken them the entire day, but Michael helped them himself to lighten the load. In the end, the foundation for the structure was finished in half a day. After that, Michael began transporting tall metal pillars from their warehouse in the parched lands, all the way into the construction site directly. The Rebornian workers completed their task well and with haste. They were extremely motivated seeing their boss work hard just like them. Michael became the courier of materials, transporting metals, woods, and even concrete. Because of that, the Rebornian workers were able to work for 3 days straight. And in those 3 days, the entire structure for their headquarters and their department store was finished. The only thing left to do was furnishing the interior, but that could be done at a later date. The most important part was that they could now officially move into their headquarters and start expanding their business in Metropolis. Of course, such a fast construction of the building surprised a lot of people. Whoa! When did this happen? I could have sworn this wasn't here a week ago. Am I hallucinating? Did anybody see the construction crew? They were so fast that almost no one noticed that they even worked on the building. And perhaps no one was more surprised than when Michael visited Claudia and told her about their newly constructed headquarters. You're already finished? She asked, incredulous. You know, it's better to build something with quality rather than rush it. Chapter 473, Underground Floors. As she looked upon the newly built structure of Michael's new headquarters, Claudia couldn't help but express her shock and awe. The building was completely new, with absolutely nothing that was reused from the previous warehouse that stood in that very spot. This was very weird because it had only been 3 days after Michael received the land. And already, there were 2 perfectly well-built structures in Main Street. "It's made out of some kind of stone?" she said, knocking on the wall to test its strength. And just from that interaction alone, she was surprised at how sturdy the material was. "Where did you get this? And how did you even transport it here?" The walls looked like it had been built using one giant slab of stone, which couldn't have been easy to move. Yet somehow, Michael was able to do it in less than 3 days. "It's not technically stone. It's a new material we call concrete." Claudia nodded, noting the name mentally. "Well, whatever this material is, it's good that you're able to construct a building this fast." They both walked forward, seeing the bare-bones interior of the headquarters. There was absolutely nothing inside, just plain concrete. Although she thought it was a bit small, she didn't voice out her concerns because she knew that Michael had no choice but to establish his headquarters here. "This is nice," Claudia praised. "Let's go take a look at your store." But as she was about to leave, Michael stopped her. "Don't you want to look at the rest of our base?" he asked, pointing down towards a hallway. "This isn't it?" Michael shook his head. "Let me show you the other floors." Confused, Claudia simply followed Michael's footsteps as they ventured towards a hallway that led to what seemed like an opening for a door. Yet, there was no door, just a hole in the wall. "What's this?" she asked him, her voice echoing as she peered down the hole into a large chasm down below. "That's for our elevator. My engineers are still busy working out the kinks on our prototype, so the service is unavailable for now. We have to walk down the stairs." He led her down a winding staircase leading further down. She had no idea what an elevator was, but she was far too curious about the staircase to get left behind. "You're creating an underground tunnel. How far down is this?" She looked over the railings of the staircase and saw numerous levels that they could walk down to. "For now, there's 10 levels, but maybe we'll expand further down in the future." Claudia couldn't keep her mouth shut as Michael took her on an exclusive tour of their underground headquarters. Though a tour may not be the right word for it. After all, the rooms were mostly empty and had no furnishing at all. As they went further down, Michael kept talking about features like a training room, a gym room, a swimming pool, a game room, and other such amenities. Truthfully, Claudia couldn't quite concentrate on what Michael said, because she was far too shocked to see what Michael was able to make in just 3 days. In that short amount of time, he created an entire fortress underground. It was insane. She would have thought that the entire thing would collapse under its own weight, but strangely enough, the material called concrete was strong enough to stabilize everything. You built this." I can't how?" Michael shrugged. "Like I told you, concrete." Of course, she wasn't satisfied with just that answer, so he made a little demonstration for her. He created a block of concrete from scratch, mixing up the materials and adding water to the mix. And using some heating magic, the entire block hardened within just a minute after its creation. He even threw some simple 1-star spell into the concrete block to show her how strong the material was. And suffice it to say, she was convinced. "I want this. I need to have this," she demanded. "If the association ever needs to construct a new building, we'll be asking for your services." She didn't care if Michael was just a novice in Metropolis. This concrete would completely revolutionize the way they made buildings. Eventually, everyone from Reborn was transferred over to their new headquarters. "Dibs on the bottom floor," Zion cheered as he ran around the room. "You can't say dibs. It doesn't work like that," Vivi refuted, buzzing around Zion's face. "It's exactly how that works," Zion replied back with a cheeky smile. Fudge, Zion, and Vivi argued with each other about who among them deserved the bottom floor. Grieve would have joined them, but he got stuck in the 5th floor forgetting where he was. While the kids played around, Shiina immediately went to work. "Very spacious, Lord Michael. Shall I set up your office on the bottom floor?" Shiina asked. "Yep. Take care of all the interior designs on every floor while you're at it." The white-scaled dragonborn bowed. "I shall employ our greatest designers for this project." Meanwhile, Yuna walked over to her aunt and consoled her. "Yuna, you never told me about Reborn. Sure I did. You never told me the entire thing. I didn't even know they had a nation in the parched lands. After seeing the speed and quality of Michael's construction project, she began asking Michael questions about his company in the King's region and all of his territories. And even now, she still couldn't process what she heard. You wouldn't have believed me if I wrote it to you, Una argued. At least now, you know. Claudia couldn't argue with her niece. If she had been in the same position, she would have allied with the Reborn company as well. And she was even having some thoughts of completely abandoning her duty in the association and just becoming a full-fledged member of the Reborn company. And, Claudia whispered, with her back turned away from Vivi. Is that a fairy? She didn't think she would see a legendary creature in the flesh, just casually interacting with members of Reborn. Oh yeah, she's Vivi. Want me to introduce you to her? Vivi. No, wait. Vivi happily flew over to their direction and she introduced herself to Claudia, who seemed even more starstruck once she was up close and personal. The usually well-spoken woman turned into a bumbling dork. Michael saw this and couldn't help but chuckle to himself. I wonder what she would say once she finds out Vivi's the Pixie Queen. As they acquainted themselves, Michael walked over to his mother and father. They were included in the move to Metropolis as well, much to his chagrin. Honey dear, when are you going to put a king-size bed in this place, so we can all sleep together? Michael immediately stopped her. Mom, there's 10 floors here, each one having 5 or more rooms. There's plenty of room for us to sleep separately. And besides, I'm too old for that. Bart hugged Lilia from the side, looking at Michael with teary eyes. Dear, look at our boy. 13 years old and already independent. They grow up so fast. Chapter 474. Asking about relatives. Michael didn't want to pull this move, but he had to do it if he wanted to get his parents off his back. Mom. Please don't embarrass me in front of Claudia. Bart and Lilia looked at each other and then sneaked a peek at the famous Claudia Montgomery. Oh right, your aunt-in-law. I see. Then, it's better for you to look more mature and independent, his mother said, winking at him. Shall we go talk to her and introduce ourselves? Bart asked. That's a great idea, Lilia approved. Michael had a bad feeling about this, so he pulled out another move to distract them from embarrassing him. Mom, Dad, did you know we had relatives here? Once he mentioned that, Bart turned serious and nodded. Yes, we do, Michael. The Vanderbilt branch in Metropolis was given to my older brother, Max. Were you too close? We're more like acquaintances rather than friends. I am the last child of your grandfather, while Max is the 5th child. He was born much earlier than me and given more responsibilities and inheritances. I remember looking out onto my window and watching him and my other older siblings sparring in our courtyard. I always thought they were cool. But I'm pretty sure he doesn't remember me. I don't even know if he knows me. With your father having 100 siblings, it's not weird for most of them to not even interact with each other, Lilia added. Michael thought it was pretty sad for siblings to not even know each other. But it made sense. If Max was the 5th child of Eyes, then he was probably given a lot of responsibilities and duties while he was still a child. He probably had no time interacting with other people. Did you meet with them here? Bart asked. No, I just heard something about them from Jimmy. Bart got curious and asked, what was it? They said that the Vanderbilt business here is struggling. They're buried in debt and are slowly losing their assets in Metropolis. That's awful, Lilia gasped. Bart sighed and nodded. That's the way of life. Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win. This is a different era now. One where the youth are slowly rising and overthrowing the current hierarchy. I experienced it myself when you shut down my business. Bart knocked at Michael's head jokingly. But it was true. The Vanderbilt business in the King's region was completely destroyed once the Reborn company took over. Dad, do you want me to help them? Michael asked sincerely. He wasn't planning to, but if his dad asked him a favor, then he would probably acquiesce. But Bart refused.
No, son.
Us Vanderbilts are prideful. We don't accept charity even when we are struggling. This is a lesson imparted to us by your grandfather ever since we were young. Then should we at least visit them? I think that's a great idea, honey, Lilia claimed, tapping her husband's arm. Bart eventually relented. I guess we should. It was only common courtesy to meet with relatives. Although Michael would be lying if he said he didn't have an ulterior motive for doing so. According to Jimmy, the Vanderbilts were so buried in debt that they had to resort to selling off their lands just to pay it off. That was a complete waste. Instead of selling it to other people, they could instead sell it to him. Since they were relatives, he would even give them a high price to buy their remaining land in Metropolis. It was a win-win for both parties. While everyone settled into their new base of operations, Michael and his parents left their headquarters and headed out to the supposed Vanderbilt estate in Metropolis. Jimmy already did some investigating and found their mansion fairly easily. And thankfully, it wasn't that far off from Main Street. They just had to travel about 10 minutes using a horse-drawn carriage. Once they reached their destination, Michael looked out the window and saw a fairly large mansion. The design looked old and a bit out of fashion compared to the modern architecture of the rest of Metropolis. By ChatJK4's estimation, it looked like the mansion was almost 100 years old. This meant that they hadn't done any redecorating or renovating in all the years they were here. The mansion would have looked good as a vintage relic from the past, but the obvious degradation made it look dingy and abandoned. The paint on the walls were chipped, the metal railings were rusted, and there were even some holes on the roof that would surely leak water inside during the rainy season. This place looked like the kind of setting that a horror movie would take place in. This place looks awful, Bart muttered. Dear, that's rude. What if someone hears you? That didn't seem possible, given that Michael didn't see any sign of movement in and out of the house. And even when he used his supreme skill, he barely saw any light mana signature from inside the house. Usually, a mansion like this would need 100 employees to keep the place running. But now there were barely 10 of them left. Michael walked over to the gate and knocked 3 times. There wasn't any answer. He had to resort to magic. A magic circle appeared in front of his mouth as he cast a sound amplification spell. Hello? Is anyone there? It was only then that the people inside turned to look at the entrance. But strangely enough, they just ignored him. Michael saw them physically turn their heads when he shouted to them. Yet they chose to purposefully cover their ears. Curious, he looked at his shadow and asked for his trusty ninja slime to do some investigating. Fudge! Can you see what's going on inside? Why aren't they answering? The violet slime popped out of his shadow and immediately jumped into Lilia's arms. Master, the head butler thinks that we are debt collectors. That's why they aren't answering your calls, Fudge said, snuggling comfortably in Lilia's chest. That was awfully fast. Fudge was a good ninja, but not that good. Oh, I already spread my clones when we arrived. Teehee. He shouldn't have expected less from Fudge, the nosy Nelly. He was about to reprimand the slime, when the front door of the mansion swung wide open and a man in a professional business suit stormed towards the gate. Excuse me, but my master has yet to decide whether he's going to sell this place. The butler respectfully apologized. They already had a couple of offers for the house, but they hoped their situation would get better so that they wouldn't have to sell it. We're not here for that, Michael said. Oh, you're not? Might I ask who you are and why have you knocked on our doorstep? Bart stepped forward and took out something from his jacket pocket. It was a golden emblem of the Vanderbilt family crest, something that all Vanderbilts were given during birth. The butler moved closer and inspected the medallion. He looked at not just the authenticity of the emblem, but also the family status of its holder. His eyes widened when he realized that Bart was a direct descendant of Eyes. I deeply apologize for my actions. I wasn't aware that a Vanderbilt would visit our premises. Chapter 475, Max Vanderbilt. The butler fixed his tie and straightened his posture. What can I do for you? He asked them. This is my son, Michael. He has a company called Reborn and we just arrived in Metropolis. We'd like to talk to Max about the Vanderbilt business, Bart said. Is he here? Unfortunately, I do not think that the Vanderbilt family can help you. The butler shook his head. As much as we would like to help another Vanderbilt, We do not have the influence nor the financial power to help you get a permit. This time, Michael was the one who took out a medal from his pocket. It was the red coin given to him by Claudia, signifying his business permit. The butler's eyes widened when he saw that. I see. What terrific news for someone as young as you, he praised Michael. In fact, the young master is also the same age as you, and he is being poised to take over the business, or at least was. There was a tinge of sadness in the butler's eyes when he talked about it. Is Max there? Bart asked. Unfortunately, you just missed him. Lord Max is away on business. He went over to Barnaby's vault, if you want to follow him. That's the auction house, Michael remembered. Why would he go to an auction house if they have no money? The only way to answer that question was if they went to the auction house right now, or just waited till he got back. Since he was quite interested in seeing Barnaby's vault in person, Michael decided to go. This place was where the auction for Sue would take place. It was better to get acquainted with it now rather than later. The butler gave them some directions on where to find Barnaby's vault, and Michael found it to be quite far away from this place. It would probably take them close to an hour if they went on horseback. Should we go? Lilia asked. Wait, Michael said as he used his shadow skill to teleport an automobile into the streets of Metropolis. The butler couldn't help but gasp as he saw a giant dome of shadow suddenly cover almost half of the street. Even the other passers-by was taken aback and almost screamed their lungs out. The mana quantity in the air took another huge hit as Michael transported a car that weighed over 1,000 kilograms. A second later, the shadow subsided back into his feet and the automobile sat perfectly by the side of the street, ready to be driven. Shotgun! Fudge shouted as he immediately took the front seat. Bart and Lilia took the back seat casually, leaving the butler completely slack-jawed. He knew nothing about the car, but he knew that making that giant metal contraption appear out of nowhere must have required great talent in the mystical arts. As Michael went into the front seat, the car roared into life, making the butler flinch. He thought there was a monster inside it. Thanks for the information, Michael said as he rolled the windows down. Soon after that, the car rolled out into the street smoothly, yet with a lot of speed. In just a second, it already caught up to the carriage that was on the further side of the street. How is that possible? The butler wondered. Wait, Michael? Where did I hear that name? It was only later that he remembered the rumors and gossips about the mystic genius boy that controlled 4 elements. As the automobile drove through the streets, everyone was looking at their car. Even the horses pulling the carriages couldn't help but neigh as they heard the sound of the engines roaring. They also thought they were getting chased by a monster. It would have caught more attention if it wasn't so fast. The car passed by so many carriages that people only saw a blur as it drove through the streets. Michael dear, I wish you would conquer this metropolis already. The roads here are too bumpy, Lilia complained. Although the suspension of the car was good, the road was just too bumpy as it was made out of uneven stone blocks. Still, their experience here was far better than what any carriage could offer. Not only that, but they reached their destination far quicker and with the added benefit of not smelling horse droppings in the street as they passed by. Eventually, they took a turn and arrived in a dead-end street kind of like a cul-de-sac. At the very end was none other than Barnaby's vault, which was quite large and extravagant in medieval standards. With just a little bit of renovations, it could totally look like one of those vintage luxury high-end hotels back in his previous world. There was even a red carpet that led inside. Michael parked the car on the line of unmanned carriages near the street, making it stand out even more. Thankfully, this part was private property, meaning there weren't any people just walking around the sidewalks. They got out of the car and walked to the entrance of the auction house. Immediately, they were greeted by the receptionist that was standing by the door. Hello and welcome to Barnaby's vault where treasure lies waiting to be bought. What can I help you with today? My name is Bart Vanderbilt. Ah, Vanderbilt? You must be acquainted with the Vanderbilt that is with us today. You can go ahead and enter the premises. The receptionist opened the door and allowed them to go inside. Once they entered, Michael saw an exquisite lobby with furniture seemingly gilded with gold. It looked more and more like a hotel as Michael observed the place. Mr. Barnaby's office is right over on the second floor, on the stairs over there. They followed the directions, and when they got there, they saw a man pacing back and forth waiting near the door. The man had gray hair and an aging skin. Still, Michael couldn't help but see a similarity to him and his father. This must be Max, Michael guessed. Brother Max. Bart called out to him. The gray-haired man quickly turned to look at Bart and squinted. Took him a couple of seconds, but he seemed to recognize him. Bart? Is that you? The two brothers approached before ending into an emotionally charged hug. How've you been? It's been so long ago since I saw you, Max said, looking at Bart from head to toe. I barely recognize you. Bart was surprised. You still recognize me? Of course I do. How could I forget? Their reunion rejuvenated both of them. The looks on their faces was priceless. This is my wife, Lilia, and this is my son, Michael. Lilia perfectly did a curtsy as a formal greeting to Max, which was quite eerie to see from Michael's perspective, since he didn't expect his mother to act so normal. Nice to meet you, Michael, is it? I'm your uncle. Have you been doing well on your studies? Lilia stepped in and answered. He doesn't need studying. My Michael is a genius, she said proudly. Yeah, he actually has a company now named Reborn, and he's expanding his business here in Metropolis. He just got his permit a couple of days ago. Chapter 476. Barnaby. Max was genuinely surprised to hear that. He knew how hard it was to get a business permit in Metropolis. Wow. He must be extremely talented to earn a sub-company from father. I'm not part of the Vanderbilt business, Michael corrected him. Reborn has no affiliation with the Vanderbilt company. Max's eyes showed confusion, not expecting to hear that coming from Michael. After all, in his eyes, the only way that a Vanderbilt could have a company of their own was if Eyes gifted it to them. That was how he got the Vanderbilt branch here in Metropolis. How is that possible? He asked genuinely. He built the company all on his own, Bart explained. He didn't receive any help from father. After hearing about this, Max couldn't help but look at Michael in a completely different light. Building a company from the ground up was one thing, but building a company that was able to pass the permit test in Metropolis was a completely different thing entirely. Michael was only the same age as his son, yet he had already accomplished something that adults couldn't even accomplish. It was unbelievable. I'll admit that I'm not that talented when it comes to business, but if you want any help or need any questions answered, then I will do my best to help you. I have a lot of wisdom about Metropolis that can surely help you. Max's offer was genuine. Michael felt it. The man seemed truly proud that a Vanderbilt as young as Michael was able to accomplish this much. It made Max feel good that there was someone in the Vanderbilt family lineage that wasn't a disappointment to I's legacy. You're from the King's region, right? That place isn't ruled by duels, so when you get challenged into one, you should be careful before you accept. Some people have talents that can't be explained by physics or magic. And if you need any help, then you can ask for some assistance in the association building, which is south from here. You can ask for Claudia Montgomery. I know that my name no longer carries any weight in Metropolis, but hopefully the Vanderbilt name will be enough for her to pay attention to you. And then you should. Max started talking about all the do's and don'ts of Metropolis. He was spouting warnings and tips to Michael, knowing that he had only recently gotten his permit. As for your territory, you should find a good spot as soon as possible. We have lost a lot of our land, but we still have a tiny little land on the outskirts of the wall. If you want, I can give it to you as your starting territory. Michael was genuinely touched that Max was offering land to him. Despite being buried in debt and slowly losing his territories, Max was still kind enough to offer Michael a piece of land in Metropolis. Now, the land was very small and not at all that valuable, but it was the thought that counts. It's okay, Uncle Max. I got it all covered. Bart tapped Max's shoulder. Don't worry. My son knows what he's doing. Max eventually relented. He realized he got too excited about sharing his knowledge because he didn't want Michael to repeat the same mistakes he made that led to their eventual downfall. Uncle Max, why are you here? Michael asked. Max remembered what he was here for and immediately fixed his formal suit and tidied his hair. I'm here for a meeting with Barnaby. He's the owner of this auction house, Max said, sitting down in a chair and subconsciously tapping his foot on the ground to ease his anxiousness. You want to join the auction? Michael asked. Max nodded. Not as a buyer, but as a seller. I need the money desperately so that I can keep my house. That's why this meeting with Barnaby has to go well. Why are you so nervous? Isn't it just an auction? Bart asked. The problem is that Barnaby's auction is a prestigious organization. They don't just let anyone enter the auction. Whether they be a seller or a buyer, they have to be in a high enough ranking to participate. But we're Vanderbilts, Bart reasoned. Shouldn't that be enough? I used to be one of the top companies in Metropolis. But that is a thing of that past. Our ranking has gone down ever since I took control of this branch. And now, I'm not even sure if Barnaby will allow me to sell an item in the auction. Michael understood why Barnaby required a certain ranking to participate in the bidding. What he didn't understand was why they also put that limit on the people that were selling items. The item itself should be the criteria, not the company selling them. As long as it's valuable enough, why won't they accept it? Michael asked. Barnaby is very particular in his items, Max explained. He only wants the best of the best. He doesn't just auction items because they're valuable. They have to be unique, strange, and something that cannot be bought just anywhere else. He requires a high rank for the sellers because he also sells the brand of the item. People will pay a higher price if they know that a certain item came from a prestigious company. And right as Max was explaining all of this, they suddenly heard the sound of heavy footsteps coming up the stairs. Oh, here he comes, Max whispered. The footsteps got heavier until the man himself arrived on the second floor. Mr. Barnaby, it's good to see you, Max greeted, bowing almost in a 90-degree angle. Barnaby was a large man, a very plump man. He was obese, plain, and simple. His hair was balding and he had a certain limp on his gait that made him walk a little funny. He even needed a wooden cane to help him walk normally. Max, Barnaby greeted him. Listen, I know that you made an appointment for me today, but I think I'm going to have to cancel. I would love to talk to you about that item you want to sell, but unfortunately, something has come up that demands my entire attention. Max's eyebrow raised. Barnaby never canceled appointments. He was always punctual to his own schedule. Something really important must have happened for him to act like this. Is something the matter? Max asked Barnaby. As a matter of fact, yeah. I just found a gem. A true treasure that Metropolis has yet to see. You don't understand, Max. I want this thing for my auction. It'll be the talk of the town. It'll attract the attention of everybody and anybody that has eyes and ears. Max was intrigued. Oh, really? This will be good for your auction then. Barnaby bit his lips. It will be. But that's if I can find the owner. Max, if you hear anything about a strange metal carriage that runs faster than a horse, then you should tell me immediately and I will reward you handsomely. That thing is fast and from what I can tell, needs no horse to pull it forward. The possibilities for this are endless, especially in the courier business. Max shook his head. Sorry, I don't know anything about that. Barnaby snapped his fingers in disappointment. He knew it was a long shot, but he was just that desperate to find an answer. Chapter 477, Barnaby's Surprise. Barnaby then noticed that Max wasn't alone. They were guests he hadn't yet seen before. Oh, where are my manners? My name is Barnaby Stinson. He only did a small bow, which was due to the limitations of his physical body, i.e., his huge belly. He then shook hands with Bart, Lilia, and even Michael, treating him with the same respect as the adults, which was quite nice to see. My name is Bart Vanderbilt, and this is my wife Lilia, and my son Michael. Barnaby's eyes widened as he looked back at Max Vanderbilt. I didn't know you had other relatives. We come from the King's region, Bart explained. Ah, I see. That is quite a long way away from here. I hope you didn't have much trouble with your travel. They continued to have small talk as they got acquainted with each other. Eventually, Michael interrupted their conversation and asked Barnaby about the upcoming auction. This was the reason he wanted to go here in the first place. "Excuse me, I heard that there's an auction going on soon." Barnaby looked at Michael with a prideful smile. "That's right. We are about to have a once-in-a-year event that all the best companies want to participate in. I pride myself in showcasing items that even the famous Alaric Goldman will want to purchase. Rare thousand-year herbs, meteor ores, exotic materials from overseas. We have everything," he said, slamming the foot of his cane on the ground in exclamation. "I was thinking about joining the auction too," Michael said casually. Barnaby was intrigued and heard him out. "Do you want to buy or sell items in the auction?" "I was thinking both," he replied. Barnaby started laughing heartily. "Ha ha ha. Very ambitious. I like it." Meanwhile, Max was surprised to learn that even Michael wanted to join the auction. And as a good uncle, he decided to help Michael with his request. "Barnaby, I will vouch for the kid. I know that my ranking isn't that good anymore, but I can assure you that anything he sells will be legitimate. I will stake my reputation on it," Max said sincerely. Authenticity of items was always a problem in any auctions. That was why Barnaby only allowed people with a verified identity to sell items. "With Max's support, then I'll allow you to sell items. But that's only if I find it good enough for the auction. You're from the King's region, right? There are some exotic herbs there that will definitely be good enough to be sold," he said to Michael. "However, buying items in the auction is another thing. I cannot allow you to participate in it. You need to have a company." Michael knew that already. "I have one. It's called the Reborn Company." It was at that moment that Barnaby's eyes narrowed, seemingly recognizing the name Michael mentioned. "Wait a minute, Reborn? Where have I heard of that?" A second later, the realization hit him like a truck. "Reborn?" Barnaby gasped. "You're part of that famous novice company that got their permit just a few days ago?" This time, Max was surprised at Barnaby's reaction. He didn't expect the famous auctioneer to know about his nephew's company. "You know about it?" Max asked. "I do. I keep my ear on the ground for anything exciting that's been happening in Metropolis. One such story is about a novice company who got their permit just 3 days into the test. Not only that, but they were even able to win a low-class tournament at the end." "Oh, you know about it?" Michael asked curiously. He thought that news only spread around in the Upperwoods district, but it seemed that it spread even this far into Metropolis. "Of course I know it. It's not every day that a tournament takes place, you know, and a scandalous one at that. Ever since I found out that the low-class tournament winner was able to defeat someone from Basilisk Ores, the name Reborn Company has been etched into my mind," Barnaby exclaimed. Max, on the other hand, couldn't keep up with Michael and Barnaby's conversation. Wait. You're telling me that Reborn, Michael's company, got their permit in just 3 days and also won a tournament against someone from the famous Basilisk Ores?" Barnaby began retelling the story he heard about Reborn to Max. And as he continued to reveal more and more, Max couldn't help but take a step back and reevaluate how he perceived Michael. Max knew about Basilisk Ores. He knew that even he, at his best, wouldn't be able to defeat one of their officers in combat. Yet somehow, his nephew was able to defeat not just an officer, but their greatest fighter at that. He never thought that his nephew would be so talented in business and in duels. This news would have become more popular if not for the boy who had quad-elemental mastery, Barnaby said disappointedly, not knowing he was talking about Michael too. "Then will my baby boy be able to join the auction?" Lilia asked proudly. Barnaby had to quell his excitement after finding out Michael owned Reborn. He had to act professional. "Ahem. Unfortunately, although your company shows great promise, it needs to be ranked higher than the 400th spot in the Golden 500. Though with your talents, I think that it won't be long until you can reach that. Maybe you can join the auction next year." Michael couldn't accept that. He didn't know if they would offer Sue in next year's auction. He had to participate in this year's auction. "Can you make an exception? If you allow me to join the auction, then I'll tell you who owns that metal machine that you wanted to know about." Barnaby raised his eyebrows, intrigued. "Who?" Me, Michael revealed. Huh? Say what now? Barnaby tried to clean his ears, thinking that he must have heard it wrong. The metal machine? It's called an automobile and it's what we used to get here, Michael said. The obese man stared at Michael in disbelief. You own that machine? Michael nodded casually. You want to see it? We have it parked right around the street. Barnaby went silent for a second, before immediately running out back down the stairs and leaving everyone in the dust. For an obese man, his speed rivaled even that of Jaco right at that moment. A few seconds later, everyone heard a shrill scream echo from the outside. It's here. This is it. They heard Barnaby's excitement all the way to the second floor. A couple of seconds later, they heard the sound of his heavy footsteps running towards them at full speed. He eventually reached them, using his cane to skid it into the flooring and stop his velocity. Ha ha! Barnaby's hands were on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. And every time he was about to say something to Michael, his excitement always ended up making his asthma worse. After 2 minutes, Barnaby finally recovered enough to vocalize his shock. To think that the great treasure was right under my nose. I was ready to search the entirety of Metropolis for the machine, you know? Barnaby then faced Michael and grabbed him by the shoulders. Michael, can you tell me more about this construct of yours? Chapter 478, Barnaby's Need for Speed. Michael explained an automobile in simple, easy-to-understand terms. He even told them how fast it could go in a straight line, which drew gasps from both Max and Barnaby, who never thought a metal object that heavy could go so fast. If that's true, then that's even faster than a cheetah, Max realized. Lilia and Bart vouched for the automobile. My Michael has built even faster cars if he wants to, she bragged. As for Barnaby, he was already impressed with the automobile when he heard how fast it went through the streets of Metropolis. And after hearing that it could go more than twice as fast, his excitement grew even hotter. But instead of focusing on the speed, he instead drew his focus on the other uses of the automobile. With that automobile, the delivery of items could be slashed in half. A week of travel can turn into just 4 days. This would be the selling point of the automobile. This was the reason why he thought the automobile could become one of the most sought-after items in the auction. So if I sell the automobile in your auction, can I participate in it? Michael's question was like a stake that pierced through Barnaby's heart. You're killing me, Michael. As much as I want to bend the rules just for that beautiful piece of machinery, I can't allow anyone below the ranking to get a spot in the auction. I really can't make an exception. Both you and I will get in trouble with the association if I allow someone unqualified to enter. Michael was bummed to hear that. He thought that the rule was implemented only because of Barnaby's standard. He didn't think it was the Metropolis Association itself who imposed it. Can I ask why they have this limit? Barnaby pursed his lips. He knew he had to keep his mouth shut, but Michael was such a special case that he ended up giving him a hint. This is supposed to be limited to only those who participate in the auction, but I'll tell you. It has something to do with duels, Barnaby whispered. Now, Michael was surprised to hear that. He wouldn't expect there to be duels during an auction of items. Maybe some companies dueled in order to break the tie between their bids, Michael guessed. Still, there must be something up with the auction if they were keeping this duel aspect a secret. He finally understood why there was a requirement for ranking for the auction. Just like any duel, both parties must be at relatively same status before they could duel with each other. That was why they limited the auction to those that already have a high ranking. It's fine if I can't be an exception. I'll just get the proper ranking. Ugh, it hurts me. It physically pains me not to have that automobile in my auction. I think that this automobile would have revolutionized the entire way we do business here in Metropolis. Michael decided to give Barnaby a break. I'll sell the automobile. He already considered it long ago. Selling the automobile in the auction would put a spotlight into the vehicle, allowing for people and most importantly companies to realize the true value of an automobile. He would have sold the automobile whether or not Barnaby gave him the exemption. Really? That's great. Barnaby cheered, jumping up and down in happiness. I have about 20 sedan cars and 10 trucks ready to be shipped out. I'll put them up for auction, Michael said. And this time, Barnaby froze midair as if he was hit by Michael's switch ability. 10-20. You have more than one? Michael nodded. Yeah. Our production is limited, but I can spare 30 automobiles for the auction. You said you have trucks? What is that? Barnaby asked. It's like an automobile, but it's twice as big and has a large container on the back that can carry a ton of weight. It's what I'll use to transport my products from the King's region all the way here. Barnaby collapsed on the floor when he heard that. The truck was even better than he thought. Using them would completely change the transportation business in Metropolis. Once companies find out what it can do, he had no doubt that it would become one of the biggest bids of the night. Let's talk about it more and make this official, Barnaby said with fire in his eyes. He was never going to let go of this opportunity. Okay, Michael replied. Barnaby immediately burst inside his room and took out a contract from his desk and began writing out the details of the auction. Michael looked over the contract with ChatGK making sure nothing was looked over. He even had Yuna take a look at it as well by sending her the details via shadow transportation. Anyway, it was just a simple agreement between them that allowed Barnaby to sell the automobile in the auction. He would get a 5% charge on the sale, which Michael thought was fair. A couple of minutes later, both of them signed the agreement. Success! This year's auction will be legendary, Barnaby proclaimed. And just then, Barnaby remembered something. Michael, you said that you're going to use the trucks to transfer your products in Metropolis from the King's region, right? Yeah. Just so that you have to go through the hassle of being inspected every time, it will be better for you to visit the Duchess castle and have the truck be approved for entry into Metropolis. Because this is not a normal vehicle, they need to make sure that the truck is not a threat to civilians. And as long as you get approved, you'll be able to get your trucks flowing through the streets easily. Michael took note of Barnaby's advice. He could see why an armada of giant trucks could send alarm bells blaring all over Metropolis. His trucks were practically moving houses. Now, he could skip all of this and just use his shadow transportation ability to get all of their products teleported directly into Metropolis. However, that wasn't practical in the long run. It was still better to have his trucks send in supplies on a frequent basis. As Michael and Barnaby finalized their deal, Max just watched everything unfold on the sidelines. He marveled at his nephew's talents in business. "Your son is very impressive," he said to Bart. "Why isn't he being nurtured by our father?" In his opinion, Michael's talents should have been enough to get Ai's attention. Yet somehow, Michael remained unknown by the better part of the Queen's region. He wasn't even known amongst Vanderbilts. "He doesn't need to," Lilia said proudly. "Our son is his own man, and he can do everything by himself without the help of Ai's." Max was happy for them. He couldn't wait until his son met Michael. His little boy would have someone to look up to like an older brother figure. He wanted Michael to influence him. That way he wouldn't end up like him. Just then, Barnaby walked over to Max once they were done making a deal. "Max, I've thought about it some more, and I think that I will deny your request again. You can't sell it." Max's face saddened. I just need the money. Still, it's way too dangerous to have the operation to remove your Godforge pieces. Chapter 479. Sunk cost. "What?" Michael muttered out. "Yeah. Max has been hounding me to include his Godforge pieces into the auction. But I've always rejected him because it's way too dangerous to undergo surgery to remove the Godforge pieces in his heart." "You can sell Godforge pieces in the auction?" "It's very common. Some of them sell Godforge pieces that they found in a discovery, while some, like Max here, sell the Godforge pieces in their heart." Max sat down on the chair and held his hands together. "At this point, I don't need the power of a diva. I need money. The amount that I'd get for the Godforge pieces will be enough for us to start over here in Metropolis and completely revitalize our business. The risk to my life is worth it." Barnaby disagreed. "Your family needs you more than you need money. Tell you what, I'll lend you the money you need." The two were good friends. And if Barnaby was a soulless human, then he would have definitely allowed the sale to happen. After all, Godforge pieces go up for millions of gold in the auction. No, I can't accept any more of your help, Barnaby. I was just getting impatient. Selling my Godforge pieces will allow us to go back to the good old days when we were at the top. Max sighed. Max having a diva wasn't that surprising to Michael. After all, he was the fifth child of Eyes and was given this branch as inheritance. It wasn't a far leap to guess that he'd get a Godforge piece as well. However, he didn't think that he'd be so desperate for money that he'd be willing to sell it and risk his life. What happened to your business? Bart asked plainly. Vanderbilts were supposed to be the wealthiest family in the world. Yet now, his brother was willing to sell his greatest weapon for money. It's a long story, Max replied. Let's talk about it back home. They all said goodbye to Barnaby and went back to the Vanderbilt estate using the automobile. Michael, I'll be notifying the Duchess about your visit with her, Barnaby shouted before they left. According to their agreement, he would help Michael make the trucks legal in the street. All Michael had to do was present his case to the Duchess. Michael thanked him before they went on their way back to the Vanderbilt estate. As they rode on the streets, Max began to tell the story of how he lost the Vanderbilt business. I made a couple of bad decisions throughout my tenure in our branch. I thought I was doing the right thing by trying to expand the company, but I was naive. I didn't know the business well enough and ended up losing all of my investment. And my inexperience led me to believe that things would get better. So, I kept spending more money to try and recoup my losses. In hindsight, I should have given up sooner. But I didn't. Slowly, the money got depleted until it led me to where I am now. Michael felt sorry for Max. He was caught up in the concept called sunk cost fallacy, which was mostly found in gamblers. Losing a lot of money led him to believe it was too late to back out now. But in truth, it only led him deeper and deeper into debt. I had to sell off most of the land to pay off the debt. However, this led me to lose more business since I didn't have that territory to rely on. Meaning I lost even more money. But hope is not all lost. I'm slowly working on bringing it back. We have a small business that brings enough money for us to stay stable. We're trying to buy back the territories we had. It'll take a while, but we'll eventually retrieve them. Max was optimistic enough to smile. Still, there was a tinge of weariness in his eyes that could never be hidden. Eventually, they arrived back in the Vanderbilt estate where they were welcomed by the butler and a few other people. Dad! One kid who looked to be the same age as Michael immediately rushed up Max's embrace. Right behind the kid was a woman who had short bob-cut hair. She gave Max a peck on the cheeks as a greeting. William, Tracy, I'd like you to meet our relatives. This is my brother, Bart, and his family. The little kid called William immediately turned wide-eyed as he saw the metal automobile that they rode in. Whoa! What's this? It looks so cool. Tracy, Max's wife, immediately approached the Vanderbilts and curtsied. Lilia returned the greeting with her own curtsy. Michael noticed that they weren't the only ones inside the mansion. There were other people too, people that weren't butlers or maids. Let's go inside and we can introduce you to the rest of the Vanderbilts in Metropolis, said Max. We are a full family lineage here in Metropolis, but I am the leader of the entire business. They all walked inside the mansion and immediately, Michael saw the other Vanderbilts giving them a warm welcome. Come on in. It's a celebration. Bring out our good wine. Let's splurge a little bit and eat some meat today. As it turned out, these people were all indirectly or directly related to Eyes. It looked more like a community rather than a family since there were about 30 Vanderbilts in total living in this mansion. All in all, there were about 8 families that made up the Vanderbilt branch in Metropolis. The one in charge, of course, was Max's family since he was the eldest and the one who inherited the branch from Eyes. Some of them Bart and Lilia were already familiar with, and some this was just the first time that they saw each other. As they sat on the dinner table, they began to catch up on each other. You came all the way from the King's region? That's very far from here. Yeah, Bart answered. We're here because my son has established a company in Metropolis. This caused quite a commotion within the Vanderbilt estate. They celebrated Michael's accomplishment genuinely. "Whoa," William gasped as he looked at Michael. Did you create that metal thing outside?" "Yeah, I did." "Whoa. I want to also become like you. I want to succeed my father and take over the business," he proclaimed. Max looked fondly at his son. He was the reason why he was working hard to bring back the Vanderbilt business. He wanted his son to inherit something worthwhile. Meanwhile, Tracy began serving the food to Michael and his family. "I'm sorry, but this is all we have right now," she apologized. They served chicken soup, which had a lot of water but not a lot of meat. Michael saw this as a sign of their financial struggles. Despite that, they still graciously served their only food for him and his family. "Do you mind if we bring some meat and vegetables here? It's my thank you for feeding us in your own home," Michael said to Max. Immediately, the other family members shook their heads no. "Oh, there's no need for that, Michael. The prices for food right now are high in Metropolis." "That's right. Today's a special occasion, that's why we prepared the food for you. There's no need to feel guilty. Eat up." They all thought that Michael offered to buy items from the markets in Metropolis to replenish their food supplies. And since they knew that they were from the King's region, they thought that their financial situation wasn't that much better from their own. Chapter 480, Meeting the Vanderbilts. "It's no worries," Michael said. He used his shadow skill to contact Shiina, who was still back at their new headquarters. He told her to bring food supplies from Angora City to the Vanderbilt estate. And a couple of minutes later, they suddenly heard the sound of the bell ringing from the gates. The butler came out and saw the white-scaled dragonborn waiting patiently outside, with about 10 crates stacked neatly on the sidewalk behind her. "Greetings. Can I help you?" the butler asked. Shiina bowed and introduced herself. "My name is Shiina and I came here on behalf of Lord Michael." "Michael," the butler muttered. It was only a second later that he realized the name. "Oh, Lord Michael has instructed me to give these food supplies to your estate." The butler could only stand there with shock and awe as Shiina opened one of the crates and showed fresh meat and produce ready to be cooked. There were even some expensive spices like salt and sugar on some of the crates. Shiina helped the butler take the crates inside, where the rest of the Vanderbilt family gawked at the bountiful food that was in front of them. They were by no means poor, but they could only ration themselves with stale bread and leftover soup. They hadn't seen this much food in over 10 years. The little William wasn't even born yet when they were successful enough to frivolously buy this much food. Is this all right?" Tracy asked them, worried. "We couldn't accept such a heavy gift." Lilia immediately eased her worries. "Don't worry, we have plenty of food to spare. Too much even. Yes, this is just a small token of our gratitude for letting us into your home," Bart said. "And besides, we're family." The Vanderbilts were teary-eyed as they said that. Bart had to shout cheers and celebrations just to bring back the mood of the party. The dinner came to a close, and the topic of conversation shifted to what they were doing here in Metropolis. Max hadn't said anything to them yet, so the other Vanderbilts were completely clueless. Michael's other uncle, who was Max and Bart's brother-in-law, spoke about one of his businesses in Metropolis. "I sell cleaning products to help with our debt," he said. "I even have my own formula for the cleaning solutions. But we have to wait a couple more months before it gets approved by the Duchess." Bart was surprised. "Does it usually take that long?" he asked. "It's easy if you're in a high-ranking company, but for struggling companies like us, we get pushed down the line. We are not their priority." "So, Michael, you're planning on creating a company here in Metropolis, right? If you're planning on selling your own items in Metropolis, make sure that you book an appointment with them months in advance." Max immediately solved the misunderstanding. "He already has a company," he said, "and the boy just got his permit a few days ago." And this time all the adults at the table gasped. They thought Michael was just an ambitious kid who set up a little company purely for the experience. They didn't think he was good enough to pass the test. Only 5 companies get their permits every year. That spoke to Michael's talents if he was able to get that in his youth. "Wait a minute. Didn't the Upperwood Festival just finish?" "Yeah. That coincides with his permit test. Lilia put her hands on Michael's shoulder with a proud grin on her face. That's right. Michael here passed the test while the festival took place. He even won a tournament. More and more gasps resounded throughout the table. They truly couldn't believe that such a young kid could accomplish so much. My God. He has the same talent as father. Why do we only know about him now? They went through the same roller coaster of emotions as Max did when he first met Michael. And while his parents beamed in happiness as their relatives praised him, Michael felt a little bit awkward. Somehow, it was a bit more embarrassing getting praised by relatives rather than strangers. Thankfully, they were soon interrupted by another bell that rang on the gates. The head butler opened the doors and took a peek at their guests. His eyes widened as he saw the gleaming armor in their bodies. But their weapons and armors weren't the one that was truly intimidating for the butler. It was the crest that was on their chest. They were none other than soldiers of the Duchess herself. The butler almost had a heart attack when he saw them in formation, raising the flag of Metropolis right outside their gates. The butler immediately informed Max and the other Vanderbilts. "Master, there's royal soldiers outside." Max immediately got up off his seat and ran out the door. The other Vanderbilts on the table followed closely behind him, with Michael and his family not far behind. They eventually reached the gates, where they saw a man in royal attire holding a scroll in his hands. Once this royal man saw Max Vanderbilt in front of him, he unfurled the scroll and began to read it to them. Hear ye! Hear ye! The Duchess of Metropolis hereby requests your appearance at her royal court. Please accept this invitation at your earliest convenience. Because of the immediately recognizable armor of the royal guards, the other people around the Vanderbilt estate couldn't help but get curious and eavesdropped on the side of the road. Wait, aren't those the Duchess' personal guards? Why are they here? And on the Vanderbilt's personal estate too. This doesn't make sense. Those guards are only deployed for important guests of the Duchess. Yeah. Hasn't the Vanderbilts fallen out of ranking? Why would the Duchess personally send her guards to meet them? The reputation of the Vanderbilts had tanked because of their bad business decisions. So, it was truly a mystery to them all that they suddenly got the attention of the Duchess herself. This situation was so strange that they could only come up with theories that didn't make sense. Wait, could the soldiers be here to take control of their mansion? Maybe they lost most of their territory by now. It's not a leap to think that they're losing the mansion as well. Meanwhile, Max and the other Vanderbilts ignored the gossip that happened around them. Instead, they focused on the royal man who addressed them. Excuse me, but who is invited by the Duchess? The man in royal attire looked at the scroll again and announced. The Duchess requests the visit of one Michael Vanderbilt and his family. Also, she requests the current leader of the Vanderbilt branch here in Metropolis, which is you, Max Vanderbilt. The other Vanderbilts gasped once they heard that. Their nephew even got the attention of the Duchess. Their status as Vanderbilts only allowed them an appointment that was nearly a year away from today. Yet Michael was personally being attended by the Duchess's personal guards. They couldn't help but gawk in awe and excitement at Michael's stature. "I'm Michael," Michael said to the royal man. "Please get into the royal carriage and we can go on our way to the castle," the royal man said. Michael, his parents, as well as Max all boarded the royal carriage that was attended by 30 of the Duchess' personal guards. Now, this incident had gone long enough to gather a lot of spectators on the side, many of whom thought that the guards were here to seize the property of the Vanderbilts. "Make way!" the soldiers shouted at the pedestrians. These are the Duchess' personal guests, and she ensured that they must be treated with absolute care and respect. Anyone who gets in our way will be punished by law. Chapter 481, Duchess Castle. After the guards' commanding shout, the crowd immediately dispersed out of the road and let the royal convoy get on its way back to the Duchess Castle. Once they were out of earshot, the spectators couldn't help but gossip amongst each other. "Did you hear that? They're the Duchess' personal guests. I thought that the Vanderbilts were supposed to be on their downfall? So they weren't here to seize their territory?" They all couldn't help but look at the rest of the Vanderbilts still left on the property. There were looks of shock, amazement, and even envy thrown at them. However, even the other Vanderbilts were shocked and amazed that their very own nephew got the attention of the Duchess. This made them feel proud once again to become a Vanderbilt. Usually, they just received looks of pity from anyone that crossed their mansion. But now, their gazes were one of amazement and envy as they got to receive the honor of having the Duchess' personal guards escort them to the castle. This kind of privilege wasn't just given to anyone. It was the kind of thing that only people from the legacies received. Because of this, the question lingered in everyone's mind. Were the Vanderbilts about to return to their rightful place in the highest spots of Metropolis? Meanwhile, Michael and the rest of them stayed in the royal carriage gilded with gold. Lilia looked satisfied and comfortable, knowing that Michael rightfully deserved a welcome this extravagant. Bart, on the other hand, busied himself and eased his nervousness through fixing up his hair and tidying his attire. Unlike him though, Max looked as pale as a ghost. His gray hair turned grisly white from all the worrying that he went through as the carriage rode through the streets. Michael couldn't blame him. The Duchess' castle did look intimidating. He looked out the window and saw, directly in the horizon, a giant mountain plateau that housed the extensive castle of the Duchess. It looked bigger than life, as if the castle dwarfed the planet and the sun itself. Having it elevated at such heights made it so that anywhere one looked in Metropolis, they would be able to see the majesty of the Duchess' personal castle. "Excuse me, but why did the Duchess ask for us?" he asked the royal man sitting opposite him. "Her Royal Highness has been informed of an invention of yours that is unusual in its nature. Usually, permission to make this invention legal in Metropolis is done by professionals employed by the royal court. But for this specific instance, the Duchess requested to see it for herself first. She also wanted to see its inventor. And that would be you, correct?" Michael nodded. Barnaby told him that he would be contacting the Duchess for the automobile's inspection. But he didn't think it would be this fast. It had only been a few hours since they left Barnaby's vault. For such a man with a heavy stature, he sure does move fast, he thought. Despite the unexpectedness, he accepted the invitation immediately. It saved him the trouble of applying for an appointment with their castle. Of course, having a personal escort wasn't too bad either. The carriage continued to ride through the streets until they eventually reached the walls separating the plateau mountain to the rest of Metropolis. The guards on the gates saw the carriage, as well as the royal man's emblem that he flashed on the window, and immediately lowered the drawbridge that allowed passage through the river moat running around the walls. Then, they ascended into a winding road that would eventually lead them into the castle itself. Michael noticed that there were quite a few people hidden in the trees and quietly observing their surroundings. I guess they're the Duchess' Secret Service. Though as good at hiding they might be, they couldn't hide the light mana signatures in their body. He still saw them regardless of their stealth spells. Anyway, they were pretty harmless. They just stayed on top of the trees and observed quietly, so he didn't mind them that much. Eventually, the carriage reached the top of the plateau, allowing them to gaze upon the castle of the Duchess. It looked like a palace built on clouds, since it was constructed atop a mountain, meaning its surroundings were nothing but blue skies. The castle occupied most, if not the entire area of the plateau. It was only surrounded by gardens that were neatly maintained, and that was it. The carriage stopped as they reached the front doors, with the royal man stepping out and spreading his hands wide with pride and bravado. "Welcome to Her Highness Royal Castle. Please make yourselves at home." His welcome was loud and accompanied by drums and trumpets that rang out from inside the doors. It was very extravagant, something you would expect a royal like the Duchess to do. The Duchess of Metropolis would first like to apologize as she is currently away on business for the time being. She wants me to assure you that she will be back in a timely manner. In the meanwhile, please go inside the royal castle and treat the castle as if it was your own. The door opened, and Michael saw butlers and maids lined up parallel in front of the doors. They kept their bow towards them, as if waiting until Michael and the others to cross before they could return to their normal positions. "This is nice," Lilia said with a proud and content smile on her face. She expected nothing less of a welcome for her son. Bart, on the other hand, took to the butler's welcome with a normal attitude. He grew up in the Vanderbilt estate after all. Max was the one who couldn't keep his mouth shut. It had been so long since he experienced this kind of extravagance that he almost forgot how it felt. As they walked through the door, they saw everything gilded with gold. The pillars on the corners, the railings near the roof, and even the tilings on the floor. It looked like they were stepping on gold coins. This palace was luxurious, even by modern Earth standards. "Welcome, dear Vanderbilts." Michael looked up towards the huge stairs that led to the second floor. There were two couples waiting at the top, waving at them in a warm welcome. He guessed that they were couples because they held each other tightly that only lovers could do. "That is Prince Harry and his wife on the right, and Princess Elizabeth and her husband on the left," Max whispered to them, as he immediately got down on one knee and showed his respect to the Duchess' twin children. Prince Harry walked down to them and tried to get Max back up on his feet. "Please, there's no need for formalities. You're here as mother's guest." As expected of a prince, he looked princely. His red hair was neatly combed to the side, and his royal attire had all sorts of golden paraphernalia that looked difficult to wear. Not only that, but his posture was completely ramrod straight, as if it had been taught to him since he was a kid. Chapter 482. Harry and Elizabeth. "Welcome to our home," said Princess Elizabeth. She had a distinct similarity to Prince Harry, and if the two were to exchange hairstyles and clothes, have Harry wear her green silk gown and have her wear his uniform, then no one would know the difference. Their respective spouses also greeted Michael and the others, showing off their grace and humility befitting of a royal. "Excuse me, but where did the Duchess go?" he asked politely. "As you may not know, there have been a lot of rumors swirling in Metropolis about the arrival of tourists from the other continents. Mother has taken it upon herself to welcome them. Despite her age, she insisted on doing it herself, haha. But it's only because of her hands-on attitude that allowed her to advance Metropolis into the megacity that it is now," Prince Harry answered. There was clear admiration and pride in his face. He loved his mother and looked up to her. "Your name is Michael, right?" Princess Elizabeth asked. "I heard that the reason why Mother wants to see you in person is because you created a truly interesting work of machinery. Is that true?" "Yes. I'm supposed to meet with her to make my automobile legal in the streets of Metropolis." "Brother, you should have heard how fast those automobiles go," Elizabeth said, her eyes almost shining. "It beats even the fastest horses in Metropolis. I bet it would even beat our royal mounts with ease." Michael was glad to see that the princess was already a fan of the automobile. This would make it easier for him to convince them to let his trucks pass through Metropolis on a daily basis. "I'm quite interested to see that," Prince Harry muttered, his sister's excitement rubbing off on him. "Michael, would you give us permission to see this automobile for ourselves?" Of course, Michael said yes. Having more potential customers was always a good thing. "I shall send in our soldiers to bring the automobile to the castle at once," Prince Harry said, signaling for the butler to fetch the soldiers. "There's no need for that," Michael interrupted him. "I can bring it here instantly if you want. I just need a big open space to park it." The prince and the princess looked at each other, confused. They thought that the automobile was made out of pure metal. "Are you sure?" the princess asked him. "Don't worry. Michael knows what he's doing," Lilia said with a smile. Because of that, the prince and the princess led Michael and the others out to the castle's backyard. On the way there, Michael got a tour of the castle in its entirety. He noticed that despite their wealth, they were still living in the medieval ages in terms of their quality of life. Their bathrooms were non-existent. They had something called a garderobe, which was just a small room or alcove on the top floor. The toilet was just a small opening that allowed their wastes to fall down on the ground outside, which would be cleaned periodically. They could use a little bit of plumbing, Michael thought. The prince led them outside to an open garden which looked more like a plain grass field that extended into the horizon. And right outside of their veranda was a large patch of grass that looked to be a playground for kids, seeing as there were wooden horses and wooden swords strewn around. "This is the open space you asked for," the prince said, still confused as to why Michael hadn't just asked the soldiers to bring back the automobile. Michael thanked the prince and walked to the open area. He closed his eyes and suddenly, a large shadow burst out of his feet and created a dome right in the middle of the grass. Harry and Elizabeth were startled, but quickly regained their composure. The hidden figures atop the castle also calmed down once they saw no sign of hostility coming from Michael's shadow. A second later, the shadow recessed back into his feet, revealing the metal automobile firmly parked on the grassfield. Amazing! Your talent in the mystic arts must be tremendous. They knew that teleportation was not a spell that not just anybody could cast. One needed to be in the 4-star realm to even begin learning about it. Not only that, but the limits of the spell were dictated by the mana capacity of the user. So, for Michael to teleport something as heavy as this while being far away from its source meant that the boy was a genius of the mystic arts. My son is praised by Cerberus Augendor himself, Bart coughed, embarrassed but still couldn't help but brag about his son. Harry and Elizabeth praised Michael to no ends before they turned their attention to the vehicle itself. They rushed to the automobile like they were kids let out on a playground. They couldn't help but admire the machine in its entirety. The metal work inside it was something that rivaled even that of the dwarves. This machine is exquisite, Princess Elizabeth praised. Harry then turned to Michael. Truth be told, Michael, we are part of the committee that decides upon the approval or disapproval of a product before they can be sold to the metropolis market. After our inspection and we deem that this automobile is safe and is as you described it to be, then we shall cast our vote in your favor. I'll also try and persuade Mother to instantly approve of it, Princess Elizabeth added. Michael nodded and gestured for them to inspect the vehicle. It's all yours, he said to them. Prince Harry walked forward and raised his hand. A magic circle appeared in front of his palms that suddenly burst out a beam of light that scanned the automobile in its entirety. Magic theory acquired. ChatJK4 said. Safety check. This spell determines whether an object is intended to be harmful to its user or to other people. As Prince Harry continued to scan the automobile, he was suddenly interrupted by a couple of kids who rushed out of the bushes and towards the automobile. It looks like a monster. Cool. What is that on the inside? It has lights. It looks like a door. Can we open this? Yay! Let's all go inside. Prince Harry's magic spell was obstructed by the arrival of the kids, forcing him to stop what he was doing. Kids, please step away from the automobile first. Your father is doing some important business, said Harry's wife as she tried to catch up to the kids. Unfortunately, they were too fast and too energetic to be caught. There were 4 of them in total, and judging from their red hair, Michael guessed that they must be their children. Oh, how cute! Lilia swooned. Those 2 boys are my kids, said Princess Elizabeth. And those 2 girls are my kids, said the prince. The royal children didn't inherit the decorum and the manners of their parents. If it weren't for their royal attire, they would have been just like any other kids playing rough in the streets. I apologize. Looks like we'll have to postpone the inspection, said Prince Harry, exasperated. Those kids will not get off the automobile till they get tired of it, which will probably happen after dinner. Michael didn't want them, which meant that he had to distract the kids. And what better way to do that other than simply borrowing items from his previous world? Chapter 483. Distraction. Michael didn't want the kids to meddle with the inspection, so he had to get them off of his automobile. And the only way to do that was to bribe them. And of course, children were very picky. They weren't entertained just by any normal item. So, he had to get something exotic, something they hadn't seen before. He had just had the perfect item in mind. Thankfully, the process was pretty easy. First, he reached down into his own shadow. His arm suddenly appeared right in their kitchen in the nation of Reborn, surprising some of the chefs that were working inside it. He took out a small wooden cup and dunked it onto the orange juice concoction that the chefs were preparing. He would have chosen another kind of drink, but this was the only one that the chefs prepared for today. Then, following ChatJK4's instructions, he filled it with other ingredients like sugar and some other syrups. And after that, there was just one final thing he needed to do. He used his supreme skill to gather all of the carbon dioxide into the air and transfer them over to the drink itself. And by applying the right amount of pressure, those carbon dioxide gases began to turn into a liquid that slowly dissolved into the orange drink. Suddenly, bubbles began forming on the bottom of the cup, which then floated up to the top and popped continuously once they made contact with the air, creating that famous and iconic sound that he was so familiar with back in his previous world.
Voilà.
He had made a fizzy drink, or what others like to call a soda. He took out this rudimentary version of an orange soda pop and revealed it to the kids. Sip. Sip. Ah, that's good, he muttered, with the sound of the carbonated drink fizzling near his mouth. Immediately, as if they were a shark sensing blood in the water, the 4 kids turned their heads towards Michael with red in their eyes. What's that? The eldest boy asked Michael, and as if not expecting their question, he shrugged. Oh, this? It's just a small little drink that I made up. The kids looked at this exotic drink and couldn't help but gulp. Can we take a sip? The girl asked him. Michael looked at them, then back to his cup. He then moved it closer to them, as if he was about to let them take a sip. And at the very last moment, he took it back from them. Ah, I don't think it's such a good idea, he told them. This drink is not like anything you've ever drank before. There's these bubbles that make your mouth all tingly. I don't think you guys can handle it, he said sternly, but secretly moving it closer to them to let them have a better look. Mind you, these kids were children of royals. They were very spoiled and were given everything they could ever want in life. If they wanted something, then the butler would move heaven and earth to get it. And now, this was the first time that they wanted something they couldn't have. And this made them want it even more. But I guess I can let you have a sip, he told them. He gave the orange soda to the eldest boy who was about 4 years younger than Michael. The boy took the cup and sipped the soda. He flinched, eyes widening, as he experienced the CO2 dissolving in his tongue, letting him experience the fizzy sensation of the soda. But after the initial shock, he realized that he didn't hate the fizzy sensation. In fact, he loved it. He felt curious, for more so he took another sip. HHH, the boy said, wiping his mouth. This is so weird and amazing. What is this? That's called a soda, Michael answered. The other children eyed the soda in the cup, wanting to try it for themselves. And so, they began sharing the small cup of soda, taking their own sips and getting hooked on the tingling sensation in their mouths. They giggled and laughed as they experienced this new sensation. It wasn't long before the cup turned empty. The boy looked at Michael and gave him the cup. We want more, he demanded. Michael inwardly smiled, knowing that the sharks took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. Maybe. But you see, I'm having a bit of trouble with this automobile inspection. I won't be able to get another cup until after it's done. Can you guys wait back in the castle and let us finish this inspection? Immediately, the 4 royal children stood up straight and saluted at Michael. Yes, boss, they shouted. And just like soldiers, they began marching back towards the mansion shouting, We want soda! We want soda! Meanwhile, their parents watched all of this unfold from the sidelines. As they saw their kids march back to the castle without another word, their jaws dropped on the floor. Their unruly children showed discipline and control unlike anything they had ever seen before. My kids have never followed someone's commands before. Not even the Duchess herself, Prince Harry said in disbelief. You tamed the monsters. You tamed the beasts, exclaimed Princess Elizabeth. Michael, you must tell me what you did to get them to become so obedient. It's just a drink that I made. I'll give you guys a sample later. Just make sure not to give it to them too often, he said to them. Are you going to sell that soda too? If so, then I'll be your first customer, said the prince, with a bit of desperation in his voice. Me too, me too. Michael nodded, easing their worries. I'll probably sell them once we get settled down in our spot. Immediately, the prince and the princess called the butlers over and notified them to start buying Michael's soda once they were available. The butlers walked over to Michael and asked him to sell them 20 barrels worth of soda. They didn't even ask how much they were worth. And Michael had a feeling that even if he priced them like they were gold, they wouldn't care and still purchase it. Maybe I should start a soda pop business, he pondered. All sorts of ideas popped into his head, but he had to set them aside for now. His focus shifted back onto the automobile. After all, he wouldn't be able to start his soda business if he couldn't get approval to have his trucks transport materials into Metropolis. Ahem. How about the automobile? He asked them. The prince smacked his own head. I'm sorry. I was so focused on my children and the soda that I almost completely forgot. I shall begin with the inspection immediately. Just like before, his hands shined a light that scanned the entire automobile. This time it was completed. The light dissipated in Prince Harry's hands. He nodded in satisfaction, as magic itself determined that the automobile was safe and had no hurtful mechanisms hidden inside. It is safe, Prince Harry declared. Now is it my turn? Princess Elizabeth asked. I would like to see the capabilities of the automobile myself. Michael agreed and gave her instructions on how to drive it. So this the brake, that's the acceleration, and I control it with this wheel. Got it, she said as she got on the driving seat. Michael was about to tell her to be careful, when the automobile suddenly rode off into the distance, leaving Prince Harry shocked at its immense speed. Chapter 484. The Twins Vote. Michael was actually surprised how well Princess Elizabeth drove the car. The automobile was an automatic, which meant it was easier to ride, but most people would still need a couple of hours before they got the hang of it. Not Elizabeth, though. It only took her half a minute. About 5 minutes later, the car came skidding towards the castle into a full stop. The princess, whose hair used to be tied up into a neat ball, now had her hair fully let down. She got out of the car, swung her hair around like a model for a sports car, and took a deep breath of contentment. Liz? The prince asked, unfamiliar with this side of his sister. I feel truly free, Elizabeth said, breathing out fresh air. Did you see how fast I went? I felt like I could fly. It's an even better feeling than riding a wyvern through the skies. Prince Harry did see the speeds at which the automobile ran through the grass plains. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. That roaring? Is it from the monster that is hidden inside the automobile? The prince asked, hearing the constant humming of the car's engine. There's no monster inside. It doesn't run on animals or magic. It runs on fuel, Michael answered. It's like oil. Princess Elizabeth put her hands on the hood of the car. You mean to tell me that something that goes this fast is only powered by some kind of liquid? That's it? You don't need magic or anything else? Disbelief was clear in her tone. When she drove the car, she felt an immense amount of power coming from inside the vehicle. It was unimaginable to her that there were no magic mechanisms inside that allowed it to move at that speed. Michael explained to them the mechanisms of the automobile. He told them how the engine created mini explosions by compressing and lighting up the fuel from the inside. They didn't understand it all that much, but they followed the logic. Do you know what this means, brother? This will completely revolutionize the way we travel the world, Princess Elizabeth claimed. Truly, I can see it now. With the speeds that it could go up to, I can imagine that it will become the new and accepted mode of transportation in Metropolis. If it doesn't need any magic, then ordinary people can use them as well. Prince Elizabeth nodded fervently, agreeing with her brother. That's true. Also, they began discussing the socio-economical impacts that the automobile would create in Metropolis. As expected of royals, their education allowed them to think in terms of the entirety of Metropolis. They talked about the effects of the automobile on the roads, which would need renovation to make it smoother and more organized. They discussed a lot of other topics, including the castle itself, the different districts, and the other companies. Anyway, Michael was glad to see that they understood the true uses of the automobile. The only downside I see is that it is limited to its fuel, the prince astutely observed. That's true, but if my automobile is permitted to be sold inside Metropolis, then I will put gas stations everywhere for refueling. They were satisfied with his solution once he described what a gas station was. "Let's talk more about this later," the prince said, trying to calm down his excitement. "If my mother sees this automobile for herself, I can safely assure that she will also understand its value." "You have our vote, Michael," Princess Elizabeth ensured. "We will endorse this automobile to our mother. And once she finds out about that soda thing, I'm sure she'll look into you more fondly. She is quite weak to her grandchildren." "That's great," Lilia cheered, hugging Michael. "Well done, son. You've influenced yet another territory to accept your technological advancements," Bart said proudly. Meanwhile, Max couldn't help but shed a single tear from his eyes as he saw this scene. His nephew earned the recognition of the royal twins. Everyone said that Vanderbilt children were a disgrace to I's legacy, and he thought he proved them right ever since their business began to fail. But now, here came his nephew, proving everyone wrong. And it was at that moment that someone knocked on the door. "So here you were. I was looking everywhere for you guys. I thought you left me." Everyone looked back at the veranda and saw a man dressed in black royal uniform leaning against the door frame. "Uncle Jack. It's nice to see you," the prince muttered under his breath. Michael thought the greeting was normal, but then he noticed the prince's slightly furrowed eyebrows, betraying his true feelings for the man who interrupted them. "We aren't expecting your visit," Princess Elizabeth said, curtsying quickly. She looked like she didn't want to greet him at all, but the manners she learned forbade her from being rude. Uncle Jack ignored them and looked beyond, towards Michael and his family. "Oh, I didn't know we had guests. I wasn't made aware," he said, staring at them. Uncle Jack had long, slightly curly hair that obscured the sides of his face. He had eye bags under his thin, sharp eyes. And contrary to the red hair of the royal family, Uncle Jack had jet black hair and a pasty white complexion as if he hadn't seen the light of the sun in over 20 years. "Who are these lovely people?" he asked with a smile in his mouth, but a glare in his eyes. Prince Harry immediately put himself forward, trying to block Uncle Jack's view of Michael and the automobile. "They are the guests of my mother. She explicitly demanded that we treat them with respect and care while in her absence," Harry said, warning him. "Oh, they're the guests of my dear old sister-in-law?" Uncle Jack chuckled. Michael looked towards Princess Elizabeth, silently asking her to clarify the situation. He clearly saw from their interaction that their relationship with their uncle wasn't that good. "This is Uncle Jack. He is the brother of our late father, unfortunately," Elizabeth explained. "Unfortunately? How rude, my dear niece. How can you say that when we're family?" Uncle Jack said, pretending to wipe off a tear. "Family doesn't try to usurp our mother's throne," Prince Harry accused. Uncle Jack had his hands on his waist, laughing to himself. "There's no evidence of that. Don't go off accusing innocent people, Harry. And usurp? If I did what you said I did, then it wouldn't be called usurping. It would be called taking what's rightfully mine. Metropolis should have been under my control, if not for my stupid brother handing over the throne to his wife." Princess Elizabeth bit her lips as she tried to rein in her anger. She wanted nothing more than to run him over with the automobile, but she couldn't. Like he said, he was proven innocent despite the accusations. "I'm sorry for him," Harry said to Michael. "Since he is our uncle, we can't do anything to him. I think it would be better for you and your family to leave now and just go back later." Just then, Uncle Jack walked forward and approached the automobile. "It's too late for that, my dear nephew. I already heard you say that this thing will revolutionize Metropolis." "What a load of bullshit," Uncle Jack scoffed, glaring at the automobile. Chapter 485. Michael is fuming. "A load of bullshit?" Harry asked incredulously. "You clearly don't know the real value of this automobile." Uncle Jack walked forward and knocked on the automobile, as if testing its durability. "Humph. This thing is clearly not practical. It's made out of metal, so it'll move way too slow." Princess Elizabeth scoffed. "You don't even know what you're talking about." "I don't have to," Uncle Jack snidely remarked. "I already know that whatever they're saying that this automobile can do is nothing but a big fat lie. And what makes you say that? Bart asked defensively, unable to hold on his anger any longer. It's because you are Vanderbilts, that's why. Everyone knows that your family is on the brink of collapse. Your business has failed. Elizabeth, Harry, doesn't it make you wonder how they were even able to build something like this when they're struggling to even keep their mansion? There's no way that they could have funded the research and development needed to create this miraculous automobile that can replace carriages and horses. It just doesn't make sense. So the only explanation is that this is a scam. A scam that is specifically meant to target us, the royal family who have unlimited funding. And I've got to give them credit for it. You guys were gullible enough to believe their lies. Right now, the automobile works just fine. But that's probably because of some magic that they installed inside. But when it comes time to sell it to the public, it's going to be nothing but dead weight. A scrap of metal. It won't matter to these Vanderbilts once they get the money to reclaim their lands. Is this what the legacy of the great Eyes Vanderbilt has left? If so, then their reign as the wealthiest family in the world will soon come to an end once he dies off. At this point, Michael was fuming from the inside. He disparaged not only the name of Vanderbilts, but also the craftsmanship of his automobile. "Stop it with this nonsense," Prince Harry growled. "You will not disrespect our guests with your lies." "What lies?" Uncle Jack laughed. "I spoke nothing but the truth. If you want someone to stop lying, then you should talk to these Vanderbilts." Michael cracked his neck. "So, you're saying that the automobile doesn't work?" Jack crossed his hands. "It does work, but with magic. How else could such a heavy weight move? And you say that the Vanderbilts are on the brink of collapse. That's the word you used, right?" Michael asked, his voice a timbre lower than his usual tone. Uncle Jack stood proud. "That's what I said. Care to prove that?" Michael's threat was ineffective against someone ignorant like Uncle Jack. "Haha. Kid, are you challenging me to a duel? Do you even know what that is?" "That's right, a duel. For the honor of my name and my family's name, I challenge you to a duel." Immediately, Prince Harry and Princess Elizabeth tried to dissuade Michael from his decision. "Michael, wait. That's not such a good idea. You don't have to do this. Don't get caught up in his words. He's just trying to provoke you. And provoke me he did. And he'll pay the price. What do you say? Do you accept?" Seeing as Michael was steadfast in his decision, Harry and Elizabeth looked at Michael's parents so that they could dissuade him from getting in a duel with their Uncle Jack. However, Bart and Lilia remained silent behind Michael's side, seemingly giving him permission. Meanwhile, Max didn't know if he was going to try and stop Michael or simply let him have the duel. As a Vanderbilt, he wanted nothing more than to see Jack's face eating the ground. However, as Michael's uncle, he didn't want his precious nephew to get hurt, especially since he was so talented and valuable to their family. "Brother, should we stop Michael?" Max looked at his brother and saw him fuming, with smoke almost coming out of his ears. "Son, I don't usually ask for much, but this time, I want you to teach that bastard a lesson," Bart said to Michael. As for Lilia, she just had a few words. "Michael dear, beat his ass," she said with a smile, but with her eyes narrowing like that of a monster. "Using my authority as a prince, I shall stop this duel nonsense." "It is inappropriate," Harry declared. "You're right about one thing there, nephew. It is inappropriate," said Uncle Jack. "I am a grown man, while the one who wants to duel me is a kid. The power disparity between us is too large. But there is a solution to that. If you can beat my personal guard in battle, then I shall accept your duel." Uncle Jack snapped his finger, and suddenly, an armored man wearing a hoodie appeared kneeling right beside him. "At your service," the guard muttered, his voice cold and calculated. "So what do you think, kid? Can you beat him in a duel?" Harry and Elizabeth gasped when they saw the hooded guard appear. They recognized him as one of the elite rogues that were trained to protect royals like them. "That's Python," Harry realized. "He's part of Uncle Jack's personal guards. They're extremely loyal to him, to the point that they are willing to give up their life to serve him." "Michael, reject the duel. He's a 6-star assassin. Elizabeth cautioned. But all their warnings went unheard. Michael accepted the duel. You're on. Ha ha ha. You have guts, kid. I'll give you that. But courage won't save you from this duel. Python, you know what to do. Upon Uncle Jack's instructions, Python jumped up in the air and landed in front of Michael. The man wore minimal armor, only a chest plate, while the rest were made out of some black material that made it hard to see in the night. Michael stood tall and looked up at his opponent. Both fighters stayed silent. Come on, kid. Make the first move. It's the only advantage you'll have, Uncle Jack mocked. But instead of lashing out, Michael answered calmly. If I move first, it'll be over too soon. His brash confidence halted Uncle Jack's laugh. The fact that he was still making these bold claims annoyed him to no end. Fine. Your funeral. Python. Uncle Jack whistled with his hands. And as soon as Python heard this high-pitched sound, it was as if some kind of switch had turned on inside his brain. He looked at Michael as if he was his mortal enemy, someone that he must absolutely kill. Magic circles appeared on Python's legs, with his calves glowing with a violet hue. He looked like a coiled snake ready to bite its target. He twisted his hands, and suddenly, a pair of nunchucks appeared out of nowhere. After a second, he lunged at Michael at insane speeds. His nunchucks swung 1,000 times per second before throwing it down to Michael's head. But instead of dodging, Michael stayed in place and let the nunchucks come dangerously close to him. Michael, what are you doing? Harry shouted. The nunchucks impacted, creating a loud sound that reverberated through the grass fields. But strangely enough, the result of the impact wasn't as they expected. There was no blood nor shouts of pain from Michael. Uncle Jack's eyes widened as he saw Michael completely unharmed. And instead, Python's nunchucks had completely disintegrated into splinters, with its pieces raining down from the sky. What am I doing? I'm letting him have the first shot, Michael answered. Chapter 486. Poison Ball. They couldn't believe what they saw. Python's weapon was completely shattered, while Michael remained unharmed. What happened? Uncle Jack complained. Why did you bring a faulty weapon? Python looked at the ends of his own nunchucks, an expression of bewilderment flashing across his face. He knew his weapon was in its best shape, and yet it was destroyed all the same. He saw it clearly. Before the nunchucks hit Michael, an invisible force counteracted the force of his lunge and completely repelled the attack. But it wasn't just that. Coming in contact with the invisible shield somehow deteriorated the quality of his nunchucks before it eventually shattered into a million pieces. Python looked at Michael with a lot more caution now. He thought that the boy was an easy target, but as it turned out, he had an incredibly complex and powerful defensive system that protected him. No wonder Michael looked so confident in accepting the duel. Seeing as melee attacks were of no use, Python stepped back and put some distance between him and Michael. That's fine. Use your abilities as an assassin. Battle him from all sides, Uncle Jack shouted, still optimistic. Python stopped backing away and began running around in circles around Michael. Soon, his body began to blur and blend with the surroundings. It wasn't long before he completely disappeared and became one with the environment. Ha ha ha. See if you catch him now, Uncle Jack goaded. His skill allows him to shoot incredibly powerful shots of magic at a distance. You won't even know where the shot will be coming from. Michael continued to stay in place until finally, he grabbed the air in front of him. Ugh! The sound of groans echoed out into the grasslands. A second later, Python's invisibility powered off and revealed him to be behind Michael this whole time. Not only that, but he had a knife in his hands and was just a second away from piercing it in Michael's back. As it turned out, Uncle Jack lied to misdirect Michael from how Python was going to attack. But somehow, Michael was still able to figure out the truth. What? How did he see that? Python's invisibility was supposed to be top-notch. It was a 6-star realm spell, which meant that even experienced wizards would find it hard to find Python before he was able to put a knife on their back. This worked numerous times before, and with people that were much stronger than Michael. It didn't make sense how he found out. But that wasn't even the most surprising part. After all, Michael wasn't even touching Python. He simply grabbed the air, and somehow this force was transferred over to Python, who was behind him. Stealth magic is still magic, Michael muttered. It's like using a flashlight to hide in the darkness. With his supreme skill, no kind of magic could hide from his eyes. It was easy to see the light mana emanating from Python's body, allowing him to see through his stealth from the very beginning. And since Python's body was covered in stealth magic, it was easy for Michael to take control of them and strangle Python with his own mana. Kurg! Python struggled to break free. He tried to use mana to get out, but this only strengthened Michael's hold on his body. Eventually, Uncle Jack had enough and took matters into his own hand. Fwyup! He whistled again, and soon, more guards appeared at his side. He pointed at Michael, and they immediately rushed towards him like they were attack dogs. That's cheating, Prince Harry complained. This isn't an official duel, dear nephew. This is just to make sure that Michael is strong enough to fight someone like me. So, it's perfectly legal for me to send in more men to fight him. Ha 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 ha. Elizabeth gritted her teeth before impulsively going towards the automobile. She wanted to run the guards over. If Python could have helped, then Michael could too. But before she could move, Michael raised his hand and signaled for her to stop. He didn't need help. With 4 new guards rushing over to him with their nunchucks from all sides, he jumped up in the air and avoided their attacks. Python finally had the leeway to escape from his grasp. He began coughing as he could finally breathe again. Come on. All 5 of you come. Michael taunted them from above. Seeing the clear disrespect, Python and the other guards created a coordinated attack. They moved in one line, slithering as they walked through the grass as if they were the body of a snake. Their nunchucks clicked and clacked, mimicking the noise of a rattlesnake. A giant magic circle appeared beneath their feet, and soon, an image of a snake with its jaws wide open overlapped their line formation. The giant snake hissed before the combined efforts of all 5 guards created a ball of poison that gathered at the tips of the snake's fangs. They locked on to Michael, who was floating from above, and released the ball of poison in his direction. This was a powerful 7-star spell that could destroy nearly anything it touched. Seeing this poison come towards his way, Michael raised his hand and grabbed the air. Suddenly, the poison stopped in its tracks. Python and the other guards felt their connection to the giant poison ball snap, just like a string being cut by scissors. They looked up and saw that the 7-star spell they created had now reversed its trajectory and came crashing back down towards their direction. He took control of the spell? Prince Harry shouted in disbelief. No matter how much he doubted it, the poison ball still shot towards the 5 guards at even faster speeds than when it left. Forced to separate, their magic circle broke and the giant snake figure disappeared. The poison ball splashed into their direction. They were fast enough to dodge most of the poison, but not fast enough to completely avoid it. Their black uniforms and parts of their chest plates began to melt, with the poison eventually eating through to their skin and muscles. And before they could even recover, they looked up at Michael. They saw something incredulous, something completely out of the ordinary. A ball of water appeared in front of Michael. Then, a ball of fire appeared right next to it. Then, a ball of earth, then a ball of air. Everyone's eyes widened as they realized what they were seeing. Even Uncle Jack gasped at the sight that beheld in front of him. Michael was controlling 4 elements at the same time. The realization suddenly dawned on them. Michael was the rumored genius of the mystic arts that had been circulating all over Metropolis. But somehow, this wasn't the end of Michael's showcase of power. He created another ball aside from the first 4. And this time, it was made out of poison, the same one that the guards created. And after that, he created a ball of lightning, which was just plasma and had the same appearance as that of the sun. 2 more spawned. One was made out of pure light and the other was made out of pure darkness. This time, they couldn't express their shock well enough. Michael controlled all 8 elements. Chapter 487, Elemental Balls Reveal. The 5 assassin guards stared at the 8 elemental balls rotating in the air around Michael. Even with all the training and practice they went through when facing a much stronger opponent, They had never prepared for a possibility that their target would have a once-in-a-lifetime talent that defied all common sense. Their training told them to take cover, yet their feet stayed stagnant in the ground. Fear took a hold of their hearts and prevented them from moving. And in the back of their minds, they knew that even if they tried to escape, those elemental balls would still hit them nonetheless. Michael raised his hand and pointed downwards. The 8 elemental balls shot towards the guards one by one at speeds that were dwarfed only by the unity gun. 8 consecutive explosions erupted from where the 5 guards stood. As each elemental ball landed, it created a much bigger explosion than the previous one. The blast sent furious winds rushing out from the explosion. Harry and Elizabeth found themselves almost unable to keep their feet on the ground just from wind alone. A few seconds later, the explosion settled down, sending bits and pieces of soil and rock raining from the sky. The 5 assassin guards laid tens of meters away from the explosion, unconscious and barely clinging to life. Their armor and their black uniform had been burnt to bits, leaving only a little bit to keep their bodies from displaying indecency. A few seconds after everything settled down, everything was still silent. It wasn't until Uncle Jack screamed out his frustrations into the world did everyone snap back into reality. No, this isn't possible. Uncle Jack lashed out, almost pulling out his hair out of frustration. You can't have 8 elemental masteries. That's inconceivable. Meanwhile, Harry, Elizabeth, Max, and any other people who didn't know about Michael's talents were completely shocked as well. And if they were being honest, they understood Uncle Jack's disbelief about Michael's magic mastery. Even throughout the written history of the world, there had never been an 8 elemental mastery person before. There were those who had 3 elements and maybe even 4, but never 8. The only rumored people to have had all 8 elements were the rumored ancient humans that created the mithril relics. It was already surprising to learn that Michael was the boy genius rumored in Metropolis. But it was mind-shattering to learn that those weren't the extent of his talents. Prince Harry stepped backwards, unable to process this information. Max, on the other hand, was among the people who couldn't express his shock well enough. He was about to speak, when all of a sudden, he saw something in the corner of his eyes. He looked to his side, and saw the unconscious assassin guard just a few feet away from him. His eyes narrowed as he saw a glimpse of something that was branded onto the guard's chest. This emblem was normally covered in 2 layers, the guard's black uniform and the chest plate that was on top of it. However, Michael's 8-element explosion burned everything away and let the hidden become unearthed and see the light of day. It was a red emblem of a coiled snake, which looked to be swimming through the skies just like a dragon. Even from far away, Max recognized this mark. This was tied to one of his greatest failures as a businessman in Metropolis. One could even say that it was the cause of their downfall entirely. A look of shock and complete betrayal flashed across his face. This mark shouldn't have appeared here. Yet it did. He looked at Uncle Jack and a sense of realization washed over him. At first, a sense of gloom flashed across his face. But it slowly transitioned into anger as he finally put a face to the man who pushed him into ruin. And it was none other than Uncle Jack himself. "Damn it!" Uncle Jack screamed out, but just as quickly he started laughing out loud like a maniac. "Ha ha ha ha! I must admit it, kid. You surprised me. Who would have thought that a kid like you was the rumored mystic genius boy of Metropolis?" Michael slowly floated down and faced Uncle Jack directly. "Am I still not strong enough to fight you?" he asked innocently. Uncle Jack spat on the ground. "You clearly showed you have enough power. You beat 5 of my greatest soldiers. Because of that, I applaud you. Clap, 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 clap." The creepy old man began to clap for Michael as if Michael's feats were just about enough to impress him. "Come on, guys. Give him a round of applause," he said to the royals. "You have finally convinced me that you Vanderbilts aren't so bad after all. Maybe the genes of the great lion eyes just skipped a generation and landed on you. Young little fella. Skip the talk. Are we going to duel or not?" Michael asked, his patience wearing thin. All right, Uncle Jack said, raising his hands. "Let us get an arbiter here for us. Dear niece and nephew, Would you be so kind and fetch us a Montgomery? The royal twins looked at each other. If it was before, they would have refused as they didn't want to become complicit to Michael's loss. But they knew better now. They immediately called for the butler to bring them an arbiter from their castle. A minute later, a woman wearing thin, rectangular glasses walked out of the castle and bowed down to the prince and princess. "This is Angela. She's the Montgomery assigned to the royal family," Prince Harry explained. Angela approached Michael and Uncle Jack. "Angela, have you been, my lovely?" Uncle Jack asked, wrapping his hands around her shoulders. The woman's face showed no expression, but her cold, unwavering eyes were enough of a warning to Uncle Jack to make him stop his inappropriate behavior. While Uncle Jack was occupied with flirting with Angela, Michael suddenly felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around and saw his Uncle Max, with his forehead sweating and a permanent frown on his face as he stared at Uncle Jack. "Michael, do you think that I could fight him first?" This was a weird request, Michael thought. "Why? Look, I haven't told you everything about why the Vanderbilt business failed. I was too embarrassed to say the truth because I didn't want you and Bart to think that I was stupid. Back when I inherited this branch from my father, I was desperate to prove my worth, to prove that I deserved this inheritance from eyes. And coincidentally enough, I was approached by a hooded stranger about a very lucrative business proposition that could boost the Vanderbilt business into the top of Metropolis. This person told me that they had just discovered an unknown mineshaft containing lots of minerals, ores, and most importantly, a piece of Godforge. They said they needed business partners to buy the equipment and manpower to explore this cave further. And if I invested a large amount of money into this venture, then I would get 60% of all the profits. As a kid, I didn't know better. I fell for this stranger's tricks. After I gave the money to them, they never appeared again. And it was only later that I realized that the mineshaft was nothing but a realistic magic illusion. Michael, I think that the hooded figure is none other than this despicable Uncle Jack. Chapter 488. Scam. Michael was surprised to learn that not only was Max a victim of a scam, but that the scammer was none other than Uncle Jack, a relative of the royal family in Metropolis. Now, Uncle Jack was surely a despicable person that was of no use to society. But that didn't necessarily mean that he was the one who scammed Max. "What makes you think so, Uncle?" "It's because of that red mark on the guard's chest," Max said, discreetly pointing to the unconscious assassin. "I will never forget it. When I met with the hooded figure, they were always accompanied by a group of masked men who showed nothing about their identity other than their eyes and this distinct emblem that was stitched onto their uniforms. They told me that this was the symbol of their company, so I thought nothing more of it. When I realized I got scammed, I contacted the association to try and get some justice. I pointed to them about the red symbol that I saw the guards wear. But they told me this company never existed in the first place. And even if it did, then it would have probably existed outside of Metropolis, which meant they had no jurisdiction over them. I was distraught when I learned this. I became depressed. So much so that my work suffered for it. It's true that I lost a significant amount of money from that scam, but it was the emotional distress after it that truly led to the eventual downfall of the Vanderbilt business. I lost my confidence. After all, I had to loan my territory just to get the money that was needed for the project. I thought I was securing my future, but I was dooming it instead. Bad decision after bad decision followed after the scam. And before I knew it, the Vanderbilt name that was revered and respected in Metropolis had turned into a laughingstock because of my idiocy. And after all these years, I never let go of my grudge, even when I thought I wouldn't get any justice in my lifetime. So, when I saw that same red mark appear again, I knew I found my culprit. These assassins are the same one that accompanied the hooded figure. And that hooded figure who commanded these guards was undeniably Jack himself. Even when he used a voice changer, that mocking tone of his can never be hidden. He's him. I'm sure of it. Each word that came out of Max's mouth looked like it was intended to shoot Uncle Jack in the heart. His disdain and hatred was clear in his voice. If so, then that's great. If we tell this to Claudia, then it is more than possible that she will be able to bring justice to the crime. Maybe she'll even be able to take back the money that you lost, Michael suggested. A sense of hope flashed in Max's eyes, but was soon clouded with doubt and uncertainty as he thought about it more. It's unlikely. We don't have any proof. Even if we can say that the red symbol belongs to Jax, we can't connect them to the scam that happened so many years ago. If even the prince and the princess were unable to prove that Uncle Jack tried to usurp the throne of the queen, then it was even more unlikely for them to find the proof that he scammed the Vanderbilt family. But suddenly, a thought flashed in Michael's head. He walked over to the prince and the princess and asked them something that he was sure he knew the answer to. Would you like to see your uncle get prosecuted for his crimes? Harry and Elizabeth looked at each other. Their near telepathic twin communication allowed them to know what each other was thinking. And the answer was a resounding, yes. We would want nothing more than to see that bastard rot in hell. Michael smiled. Then please help us. Just like you, we think that Uncle Jack is responsible for a crime that he hasn't yet paid for. If we wanted proof of his heinous doings, then where would we be able to find it? Prince Harry covered his mouth, making sure that Uncle Jack couldn't read his words. But it looked like they didn't have to worry since the man was too busy flirting with the arbiter. We also thought about this before. We had investigators try and find proof that Uncle Jack was the one who put the poisoned leaf in our mother's tea. We knew that he had to have hired an herbalist to concoct the poison, so we tried to track down where he could store the herbs. They were able to find Uncle Jack's secret mansion near the outskirts of the walls. Elizabeth bit her lips as she remembered this specific memory. But the place was surrounded by his guards at all times. No one is allowed to enter, not even us. We tried and successfully invaded his mansion with ease. But when it came to finding evidence, we found nothing. As it turned out, he had a secret vault inside his mansion that only he knows where it's located. We tried to find it, but Uncle Jack arrived and flipped the whole situation and made it seem like we were the ones who tried to poison him. He's sly, Michael thought. If he wanted to find evidence, then he needed to find that vault in the mansion, which seemed to be guarded 24/7. But there is hope, Prince Harry soothed. As much of a narcissist Uncle Jack is, he can't do it all alone. He has a treasurer called Viper Ion. He's the only other person who knows the location of his secret vault. Max raised his head, remembering something. I do remember another guy that was with him back then. He was a chubby guy, right? The royal twins nodded. That's him. If you can get Viper Ion to talk, then he'll lead you to the secret vault. Max couldn't help but express his frustration. Justice was so close, yet so far away. How are we going to do that? He grumbled. First, we have to sneak into his mansion undetected. And then we have to somehow make Viper Ion sell out his own boss? That's impossible. The royal twins had the same reaction. This was the reason why they hadn't been able to prosecute their uncle after all this time. The worst part was that this was probably the best chance they would ever get. After all, 5 of Uncle Jack's guards laid unconscious on the ground, which meant there were fewer people guarding his mansion. Not only that, but the duel with Michael made sure that Uncle Jack was properly distracted and had no way of finding out that they were trying to get into his vault. If I were to do it myself, then it would be easy, Michael said, surprising them all. But I can't be in 2 places at the same time. Michael sighed. He didn't want to do this, but as the famous saying said, it takes a monster to kill a monster. He looked down at his feet and summoned his trusted ninja slime. Fudge. Chapter 489. Fudge Unleashed. Fudge popped out of his shadow like a ball bouncing on a hardwood floor. There was a certain pep in the slime's step, as if he knew that his unique talents were about to be called upon for a mission. Yes, master? Fudge asked, already smiling. Looks like you already know what to do, he said to Fudge. He had no doubt that the slime had been eavesdropping on their conversation this entire time. So, Fudge knew the situation even if he didn't explain it to him. Fudge, find that evidence for us, Michael said to him hesitantly. Max and the twin royals looked at the violet slime and couldn't help but express their doubt. Michael, is this your tamed monster? Prince Harry asked. And are you commanding him to infiltrate Uncle Jack's mansion? When Michael said that he had someone perfect for the job, They expected him to bring out a secret guard or assassin that he was connected with. They would have never expected in a million years that it would be a small little violet slime that had a penchant for wearing black rogue clothes. "Yes, this is Fudge," he said, introducing the slime to everyone. "Heya, best ninja in the world. Reporting for duty." Elizabeth's eyes widened. The slime was the cutest thing she had ever seen. If it weren't for the importance and heaviness of the situation, she would have immediately gone over and hugged the little fella. "Ahem, Michael, are you sure you want to deploy this cute, slime?" Michael nodded. "Trust me, if there's anyone that can do it, then it would be Fudge." The violet slime jumped up and down after receiving that compliment. "I have to reiterate that those guards are the best at what they do," warned Prince Harry. "I'm not sure if you know, but there are Secret Service guards monitoring the castle at all times. Uncle Jack's guards are the same, if not better, than the guards here when it comes to protecting their mansion." Fudge looked around and scoffed. "Oh them? Then this will be easy. They're not even ninjas." As arrogant as it may have sounded, Fudge had a point. Michael knew the slime would have no trouble sneaking past the guards. It was dealing with Viper Ion that's the problem. Master, is this important?" Fudge asked. "Yes, Fudge. Very important." The violet slime's smile grew wider. "Then that means that I can use whatever means necessary to do the job? Am I correct?" Michael sighed. Fudge was very good at his job. Too good, one could even say. However, the little slime also had a tendency to go off the books and do things that others might consider villainy. There were no such ethical boundaries for Fudge. Heck, he even built a religion purely to manipulate his enemies to do his bidding. Michael had no doubt that he would be able to fetch them the necessary evidence to put Uncle Jack behind bars for the remainder of his life. However, he was worried that by using Fudge for this reason, he could end up releasing a far greater threat to humanity than Uncle Jack could ever do. "Master, am I free to do what I want?" Fudge asked again, giggling and barely able to hold his excitement. "Yes, Fudge. You do what's necessary to get to the vault." Fudge swallowed his smile and turned solemn, like a good ninja should do. He looked up at Michael and saluted. "I shall not disappoint. The shadows shall be ever present wherever secrets lie." The slime acted cool and mysterious right before sinking down into Michael's shadow. Just before he completely disappeared, everyone heard the sounds of an eerie laughter coming from the shadow. Michael shuddered at the thought of what he had unleashed. "I hope that this works," Prince Harry prayed. "I'm going to ask for forgiveness now for whatever Fudge is going to do," Michael muttered. It was at that moment that Uncle Jack finally had enough of getting constantly rejected by Angela. He turned towards Michael and angrily gestured for him to come over. "Are we going to start this duel or what?" Michael turned to everyone and gave them a reassuring nod. He then walked over to Uncle Jack and stopped right when they faced each other. Angela stood at their side, still displaying a solemn expression. She looked like the epitome of fairness. Her demeanor reminded Michael of the famous sculpture of the blindfolded woman holding a balance scale. This was very impressive, given how Uncle Jack tried so hard to piss her off. "Please state the terms of your duel," she announced. Uncle Jack looked at Michael and gave him a warm and welcoming expression. "Michael, boy, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. I think that this duel is a chance for us to make up and bury the hatchet between us." Michael nodded. "Our grudge will be settled for sure after this duel," he muttered. "Then we're on the same page. You see, I think that I was very much mistaken about your automobile. Your talents have led me to realize that maybe you are telling the truth and that the automobile will soon revolutionize Metropolis. And given how complex it is, I'm willing to bet that you will have trouble producing these automobiles on a large scale. By my estimation, you'll only be able to create one per week. And that's if you have the best blacksmiths on your side." Uncle Jack then walked towards Michael and got closer to him. "Now here's the thing. I want to help you out. You'll need a lot of money and capital to be able to get the labor and the tons of metal resources you need for the production of the automobile. I'm sure you don't have that. The Vanderbilt family here is struggling to even keep their mansion. But you don't have to get bogged down by their poverty. You can get it all on your own. And here comes me. I am going to offer you a deal of a lifetime. You see, there's this mineshaft that I just recently discovered. And the potential payout for this mineshaft will be very lucrative for both you and me. And don't tell others I told you this. But there may also be a Godforge piece hidden down there somewhere. If you give me just one of your automobiles, then I will consider it as enough payment for you to get a whopping 50% of all the profits in the mineshaft. This is an investment opportunity for you. It will allow you to bring back the glory of the Vanderbilts, and maybe even get the attention of your grandfather. So, what do you say? Uncle Jack couldn't hide the greed from his eyes well enough. Even if Michael hadn't heard this story before from his Uncle Max, he would have still doubted the authenticity of this supposed mineshaft. Since he already knew that the offer was nothing but a scam, he knew to avoid it entirely. However, call it being vain, but Michael wanted to gain something from this scammer as a sense of poetic justice. And what better way to do that other than to have a contract overseen by a Montgomery? Chapter 490, Trap in the Terms. I have another proposal, Michael suggested. If you win the duel, then I will give you the step-by-step instructions I followed to create the automobile from scratch. Immediately, Uncle Jack's eyes flared up with excitement. He thought he was getting the opportunity of a lifetime. But of course, Michael didn't tell him the whole truth. He specifically said that he would give up the instructions on how to create the automobile. But he didn't tell Uncle Jack that it was written in English, making it completely useless to him. He still made sure that Uncle Jack would win nothing in the very unlikely event that he would lose. Ha ha ha, you're making the duel very exciting for me, boy. Tell me, what will I have to give up? Uncle Jack said, rubbing his hands together. He looked just about ready to agree to any terms Michael presented just to make sure that he didn't suddenly back down from the fight. You can agree that the instruction manual is very valuable, seeing as it contains the secret to my automobile, right? Stop teasing me now, Uncle Jack muttered with a laugh. If I win, then I can have everything that you have right now in person. Uncle Jack laughed. I see. You must have seen my mithril relic, he said, bringing out the staff from behind him. This was his weapon. It was a glowing violet staff with a mirrored ball at the very top. This weapon is indeed valuable, and in my opinion, it is equal to the instruction manual for your automobile. If that is the terms of our duel, then I accept. Michael smiled as he heard those sweet words come out of Uncle Jack's mouth. There was also another trap hidden within his terms. Uncle Jack thought that he only wanted the mithril relic he had on him. But in truth, Michael wanted something that was a lot more personal to him. It was so personal, in fact, that it could only be found in his heart. He aimed for the Godforge pieces in Uncle Jack's body. There was no doubt in Michael's mind that Uncle Jack had a diva. It must be the reason why he was so confident in fighting against him, even when he revealed that he had an 8-element mastery. In contrast, Uncle Jack thought that he had no diva. The old man must have thought he only relied on magic and mana, which was why it never even occurred to him that Michael was targeting his Godforge pieces. And of course, since Angela Montgomery was presiding over this duel, she would ensure that the terms of the match would be followed after its conclusion, which meant that Michael could legally obtain the Godforge pieces in his heart. Michael, do you accept the terms of the duel? Angela asked. Yes, he replied. Now, we must move on to the venue of your duel. Uncle Jack shrugged. It has to be a Sanctum duel, of course. Agreed. Angela nodded. Then please discuss the environment of the Sanctum. Uncle Jack crossed his arms. I would like a large cornfield farm. It has to have a big open area and tall stalks. Michael smiled. An open area? I have no problem with that. Angela took their words and started to concentrate on her skill. She closed her eyes, and suddenly a bright white light emanated from deep within her skin. Her body levitated a few feet off the ground before she started mumbling some unintelligible words. Her words abruptly stopped, and right after, a swirling white portal appeared in between Michael and Uncle Jack. Let's see that mystic talent of yours beat my power, Uncle Jack dared before he stepped into the portal and disappeared inside. Michael took one last look back at his family, who gave him support and encouragement too, as his mother said, beat Uncle Jack's ass. He stepped inside, with a bright white light blinding him for a moment. And when he opened his eyes, he saw himself right in the middle of a cornfield. Everywhere he looked, he saw nothing but tall corn stalks blocking his way. Michael, boy, are you there? Can you hear me? I'm right on the opposite side of you. Uncle Jack let his location be known almost immediately. This completely ruined his advantage of having tall corn stalks in the first place. Michael knew that something weird was afoot. He used his supreme skill to look through the thick cornfield until he eventually saw the light mana signature coming off of Uncle Jack. And just like he said, he was on the very opposite end of the sanctum. Ha ha ha. Are you wondering why I want you to see me? Uncle Jack asked, his laughter reverberating through the open field. It's because I want to show you that your gift in the mystic arts is completely useless to someone who has my ability. Or should I say, ability. Uncle Jack raised his staff, with its purple glow growing ever brighter. A green venomous snake with great, big black eyes appeared on top of Uncle Jack. Strangely though, there seemed to be something off with this green snake. It looked way too thick to be a snake. Not only that, but its head and its eyes were abnormally bulged outwards. Upon first glance, it didn't even look like it had fangs since it wasn't hissing or unhinging its jaws like the other snake diva he had seen before. Ha ha ha. This is called a diva. The power that it gives me triumphs even against someone like you. For elements, 8 elements. It doesn't matter how many you mastered. Abilities function completely differently than magic. My ability, for example, allows me to become a dragon. The legendary strength, speed, and fire of the Draconians will be under my command, and there is nothing that you can do to stop it. Roar. With his supreme skill, Michael saw Uncle Jack's body slowly transform into a 4-legged creature. Wings suddenly sprouted out of his back and slowly unfolded. His body grew larger and larger, with dragon scales spontaneously growing into his stretched-out skin. His arms and legs tripled in size, turning crooked and gaining large claws at the ends of his nails. His neck elongated and his face morphed into a terrifying dragon with whiskers along its nose. At the same time, a tail sprouted from his back and grew serrated plates on top. In the end, his huge body became far too heavy to stand upright, and he fell hands first into the floor, completing his transformation from a bipedal man into a 4-legged dragon the size of a 4-story house. The dragon towered over the cornfield, allowing Michael to see it with his own eyes. Ha ha ha! Uncle Jack laughed, his voice large and echoey. Witness the wrath of a dragon. The dragon opened its mouth and breathed out a plume of fire that burned everything in its path. The cornfield went ablaze, increasing the temperature even more. The blue skies of the sanctum turned dark orange. Did you know that dragon fire can even burn through magic? Do you feel the mana in the air start to weaken? Do you feel it start to burn away? Your invisible shield will be of no use.